Ms. Bellinger, if you'd lead us in a prayer, please.
Okay. Dear Lord, thank you for all the many blessings you've given us, for the many people from all walks of life who live in this city. We ask you to bless each and every one of them and each of us. Please give us wisdom as we work for the good of all, and help us make good decisions in truth and love, which are inseparable in you. We ask all of this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. And if you will, rise with me and let's pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll begin with our work session. Presentation of department budgets for fiscal year 2021-2022. The city manager and finance director.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is part two of our budget presentations. We had a whole slate of presentations last Tuesday, and today we hope to complete the remainder with community service and a lot of the administrative functions. I don't know if the finance director has anything to say, or we just turn it over to Brian Bray and his team to go ahead and begin the comments for the council.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Brian Bray, your Community Services Director. The presentation this evening is going to look a little different than you saw last Tuesday. Last Tuesday we went full department to department. We've kind of condensed it. That way then you're not here for listening to me talk for 3 hours. So the reason I bring that up is there's not a break between departments. So please, if you have questions, feel free to ask, because there's not a slide for questions until the very end after we've gone through all four. So as long as that's okay with you, Mayor, I'll proceed.
Yes, sir, please.
So for Recreation, Parks, and Cemetery accomplishments, we continued with the funding from the city, thank goodness, that City Council park improvements with Festival Park Playground. We also were able to paint a mural on the basketball court there at Festival Park. That's something that was also listed in the Parks Master Plan, was bringing art to the park. Continuing with our garden capital theme, we've continued to plant pollinator gardens. We planted the last one most recently at the Railroad Depot. It's kind of along the fence line there in the parking lot. Something that's not listed on here, but I also think is a major accomplishment, and that is bringing Wi-Fi to all of our park pavilions. A lot of the things in the Community Service Division, it sounds weird to say, but are in thanks to COVID, and that is one of the things that came out of COVID, was being able to provide Wi-Fi in all of our park pavilions. For Recreation Department, they were able to integrate a new software that allows each of you to sign up for Zumba, adult basketball, or Councilmember Anderson, adult soccer, whatever your interest is. You can do that from the comfort of your home. Also, they were able to award 13 historic restoration grants in the 2021 cycle, and that is the $25,000 that you allocate annually or have allocated annually goes to the Historic Restoration Grant Fund, and that this last cycle that helps do $206,000 worth of projects that are all within our 5 historic districts. Future goals, the Parks Department really wants to prioritize our athletic fields and facilities, and that's not expanding the footprint of them, but increasing and doing a better job of the turf management, so that the playing surfaces themselves are of a higher quality. As I mentioned about the basketball court, we were able to hire a local artist. Unfortunately, he's left, but he's a homegrown artist, in Tyson Davis. We've been in discussions with him again to do a mural on the basketball court at McCrimmon Park, and we hope to be able to do one on Ritchie Street Park for next year. You've heard me and several others. I know Sherry also mentioned about disc golf. That's a big, Nacogdoches is set up ideally for disc golf tournaments. And so we really want to continue to improve the disc golf offerings that we have here, whether it's Pecan Park tee pads or a new course out at the lake. We're also investigating a resident versus non-resident fee for our recreation activities. That's something that's very common in the Metroplex areas. You know, whether you live in Frisco, but you go to the activities in Louisville, they're going to charge you a different fee if you're not a resident of Louisville, just for example. And that's something that we will bring forward to you for consideration. That's just something that we have as a future goal.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
And we want to do this because the parks system overloaded with outside the city limit, or is it?
It's something that is a common theme throughout recreation departments in the state and the United States. So it's not something that we have to do. It's a way of looking at increasing revenue. Those that live in the city, you pay for your streets through tax, et cetera. It's that same kind of thought process as myself. I live outside the city, but if I'm using the recreation center, I'm kind of using it for the same cost that Mayor Mize is using it. That's the idea behind it. But we're just doing the investigation part to kind of see what that looks like. And so that's a goal that we have, is to bring that to you in the future, but we don't have any proposals at this date.
Okay, when you say outside the city limit is we losing revenue.
Potential revenue loss. So the resident versus non-resident fee, I live outside the city and you live inside the city and it costs you $2 to go play basketball.
Okay.
It might be that it costs me $4 to go play basketball because I don't live inside the city. And so that's a potential revenue loss. We're not actually losing revenue today.
Yeah, we don't want to lose revenue because we're going to charge a larger price to non-resident. Okay, thank you.
So for animal services and library, they've done a phenomenal job. Teresa Jordan and her crew have done a phenomenal job of reducing the euthanasia rate by 25% over the last 2 years. And bring you some stats that aren't on there as well, but they have set records this year for live exits. So that's adoptions, fosters, animals leaving to go to a family. Meanwhile, they've set a record for call volume. They have responded to over 1,000 call-outs. And kind of the third component of that is they also have set a record for the lowest number of animal intakes. So it's kind of an odd idea there that they have more calls than they ever have. They have fewer animals that they've ever brought in, but they're also exiting more animals. And that's simply because of change in philosophy. Is they've gone from, your animal's loose and so I'm just gonna write you a ticket. Well, let's sit down and let's talk with Amelia. Let's talk with, Roy Bolden. Why is his animal always getting out? Oh, if it's a simple fix, well, hey, we're not gonna do it for you, but we can talk about how you can fix it. And it's more of an education and customer service role. And we're starting to see the effects of that after a year and a half, 2 years of implementation. The library is always really good about writing grants. These aren't things that we budget for because we never know whether they're going to come in. But this year they've received $38,000 in grants. Something that is a small stat, but to us in our world is a big deal. Mercedes citizenship class, 2 people who attended that class have received their citizenship. So it's only 2 people, but that's 2 more than we had before her program. So kudos to Mercedes for that. Future goals for animal services. It's a lofty one, but they really want to reach 10% euthanasia rate. They're not there now, but I have no doubt that they will come really darn close, or they will meet that goal. They also want to start partnering with more entities. They partner with our community service departments on a regular basis, because if you've been out to the animal services department, there's not a lot of room for education. It's built for housing of animals and care of animals. But a big part of their mission is education so that they can go to you or have you come to a program. So they're doing programs with the library, historic sites, recreation, and they want to continue that role. Library, like with most people, they want to get back to the numbers that they had before COVID. But they're also really targeting getting their programs outside the building so that you don't have to come to them, that they can provide those services either online or at buildings like City Hall, for instance, if they could do a program downtown. Historic sites, Main Street accomplishments. I think no doubt their biggest one this year is that they started Zion Hill Restoration Project. It's a marathon of a project, but they're well underway, and knock on wood, we haven't had any major problems. We all know that it's going to come at some point. When you do a major wooden restoration project like that, you're going to uncover something. So far, everything is smooth. Also with the Bright Foundation funding, they were able to complete some interpretive signage at Oak Grove Cemetery. Future goals is transitioning Main Street from a place that plans events to one that is more focused on economic development and helping the downtown business owners and tenants achieve their best business instead of hosting 5 wine swirls in a year. Yes, that's possible, but that doesn't help you as a downtown business owner or you as a property owner. And then obviously working with the consultants to complete the downtown master plan. Parks and cemetery, there are operational and service level issues. And this is not something new, but vandalism is something that causes a lot of time and money on the park side. Unfortunately, it's mainly time and frustration and not money, but that is a constant issue that they are facing. Their emphasis has really been on getting the fields back up and running for our sports complexes after. There's a different level of care when the Houston Astros are playing a game versus when they're away, right? So it's kind of the same idea for the Parks Department. They're still maintaining them, but there's a different level of care when the sports are back in session. And also, unfortunately, a lot of our restrooms received pretty significant damage during the ice storm, and that's an ongoing process.
Talk to us some about that, Brian. You've told me a little about it, so we've got a schedule of bathrooms that we're going to work through.
Yes, sir. So kind of part of it is in conjunction with the ice storm, and some of it is just age. So it's kind of a combination of the things. We have 3 restrooms that are out for bid right now. And so by the end of this calendar year, we will have new restrooms at the Sportsplex, at Maroney, and at Pecan Park. We're also designing right now, or Army Curtis, I'm not a designer, but Army Curtis, the architect, is designing a restroom that'll replace the one that we have back here behind Festival Park. Okay.
You pointing?
But so there was something popped up on the screen,
Oh,
and
okay.
I thought I
Okay.
touched something, so I had to look at the IT person. I apologize, Mayor. I thought, oh, what did I do? Because the one behind us here in Festival Park received significant damage during the ice storm, and we thought we'd made all the repairs. We just could not keep it open. Part of it is the age. And so we made the decision to close it, provide porta potties, because we know that a restroom is coming. That would be a different decision if it wasn't on the books, it wasn't in the budget, but that was the decision we made.
So we're in design on that one in
Yes, sir.
probably 6 months, I think is what we talked about,
Yes, sir.
potentially. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Innovations and efficiencies. Parks Department is really working at using the NAC 311 app so that we can then start seeing, we'll use that Festival Park restroom as an example, how many maintenance calls are they getting to that facility? The park staff, and Hector behind me back there in the back row, he has a pretty good idea of how much money they've spent, but he might be off by $5,000. Well, that's a big sum, and so we're really wanting to focus on using that app. So recreation, operational service level issues. This one is pretty much all COVID. So they are regaining momentum after having a building closed for 13 months. It's really tough because each one of you and myself, we develop different habits. We started doing different things. If I went to Zumba every day, well, then I don't go for 13 months. It's kind of hard to get that back up and running. So that's also their emphasis has been restarting all those programs. And also finding out what programs we need to offer that we didn't offer last year because there's new interest. One of our upcoming programs is a sign language program. It's something that just came out of the COVID era because we started doing it during COVID because it's something we could do online, and it had a following. So we're continuing that, and we're trying to boost that program. Innovations. We achieved a completely different level of service after manning the call center for COVID. It's different when we're dealing with an angry mom or a grandmother or a dad where they're standing at the front counter because their son lost a basketball game than talking to a person who is confused because they don't understand what COVID is, they don't understand how to get a vaccine, they don't understand how to get tested. And so that the staff really had sort of a crash course in a different level of customer service, and that's something that was a positive out of the COVID era. So for animal services, I kind of mentioned earlier, their facility, the issue they're facing is their facility isn't adequate for the service they want to provide. Notice I didn't say the service that they can provide because they want to do more. Right? They're a great group of people, and they'd love to have a building twice that size, simply so that they can take care of more animals and do more education. Their emphasis over the last several months is continuing that level of care for the animals that they have while doing some pretty big facility improvements. If you're washed out your garage, it's concrete, and if you don't have it properly sealed, that water soaks in there and it stays. Well, each one of those animal care rooms gets washed out once, twice, 3 times a day, depending on what kind of animals are in there. And so that floor takes a beating. So one of the things that they did was they had to resurface 2 of those floors. Well, that means they have to move all the animals out for an extended period. So that's been their challenge lately is how do we take care of the animals in the same way we always wanted to while doing the facility improvements? So library's emphasis is continuing to provide access to technology, printing, services, programs, and the service level changes that have come out of that are actually those very things that they implemented, and that is things like curbside service. You can send Mercedes an email, you can call up there, you can request any print material or library of things, you know, that you can rent a bread maker, it's free, or cookie sheets. I mean, there's telescope, there's everything but power tools you can pretty much get from the library department. They also instituted a hotspot and laptop checkout program, online programming, and then what I mentioned earlier about the call center and also staffing of the shot clinics that Keith and the fire department were able to put together. Historic sites, their combining of Main Street and historic sites, it's created a unique issue, and that is how do they provide the services to the citizens and the downtown business people while maintaining open hours of the museums. And so it's not an impossible task, but that has been their issue as of late. The benefit of that is combining those two departments. They've been able to increase their social media interactions, marketing of downtown activities, outdoor living, walkability. So that's the benefit of those two, is now they're kind of one combined force and one big punch as opposed to two small ones. Under the post-COVID service changes, I've mentioned several of these, so I'll kind of skip over some of them, but the new software at the Recreation Center. One of the things also that Animal Services has done that has helped immensely, and that is schedule surrender times. So before, if they were open, you could come surrender your animal. And that created a capacity issue, because if they were already full, and Mayor Mize brings in 5 dogs, well, that's a problem. They have to figure out what to do with these extra 5 animals. Now that they know when they're coming, they can better work with rescue organizations, fosters, save the space, and so it's a better care for the citizens and for the animals. Museums, instead of having large group tours and large events, they've shifted to more of a small public event venue while increasing their outdoor interpretation. So they're kind of trying to push the education to the outdoors and using interpretive panels. Main Street, they were able to bring back Wine Swirl, if any of you went. That was a big event this year. And they're also working on downtown economic development programming. So our full-time summary, these 15 and a half parks and cemetery employees maintain approximately 500 acres of city property. That's a big chunk of the city. Now, I'd like to leave it there and may have you go, wow, but a big part of that is the dam at the lake, the airport, and those are done twice a year instead of on a regular basis. But that also includes 20 parks and 4 cemeteries. Recreation Department, they have 5.5 employees. There's 1 part-time position that's currently open. Luckily for the whole division, there's not a retention problem. There might be 1 part-time, 1 full-time open at any given time, but it's rare that there's more than that. And you can see here there's 2 part-time positions that are open. For Animal Services, they have 8 employees there. They've requested 1 in next year's budget. Library, I apologize, there's a typo on my end. It's actually 7.5 current. They aren't requesting a new half-time. That is 7.5 and 7.5. Historic sites in Main Street, that 3.5 looks a little misleading because that 3.5 is made up of 2 full-time and 3 part-time. And those 5 individuals are the ones who keep 3 museums open and are planning and overseeing the restoration of another museum. That gives us a total of 39.5 employees for the division. Organizational chart is pretty straightforward. We have Hannah Anderson as the Assistant Community Services Coordinator, or Director, excuse me, and she oversees all recreation activities and custodial services for the division. We have Parks and Cemetery Manager, and that's Tommy Stanley Jr., and he has supervisors under him for each of those functions for cemetery and parks. And then we have Teresa, I mentioned earlier, as Animal Services Manager. And we have Jessica Sal is our duly titled Historic Sites / Main Street Manager. And then under her is a full-time Main Street assistant who also serves as our Public Information Officer. And then Mercedes and her staff, I think y'all have probably met all of them. They're always out and about. So on the revenue side, it's kind of difficult to predict revenue for cemetery. We did on that bar chart, you can see we had a big increase in 2018, 2019. That's simply because we expanded Oak Grove. And so there was a big push because everybody wanted those spaces in Oak Grove Cemetery. And then 1920, we kind of dropped back down to that $80,000 a year range. And then this year, it spiked back up again because once again, we opened new sections. And so people are wanting to purchase, they want to be able to pick that spot that they want in the cemetery. So over the last 4 years, we've averaged 100,000. But if you pull out those 2 years, it's closer to that $80,000 mark. I'm sorry, the screen just went blank, but do you have it in front of you?
Ours is too.
Okay, there.
There we go.
So the Park and Cemetery proposed budget, there aren't a lot of changes in this proposed budget. I'll highlight a few of the items. Over supplies and materials, you'll see that there's a pretty big decrease there in the proposed of 75,000 versus the 91,000. And that's new vehicles and new mowers cost less to repair. It's much easier to maintain a new vehicle than it is a 10-year-old vehicle. And then also kudos to Tommy and his crew is they looked at a better way, a more efficient way of moving from park to park, so it cost less gas, there's fewer miles, and so there's also a reduction in fuel cost. Under contractual services, that $181,000, that sounds like a lot of contracts, and really it's broken down in just a couple of things. Utilities, our baseball field has a lot of lights. Soccer, softball, there's a lot of utility cost in the Parks Department. That's not air conditioning, it's just electricity. Porta potties, we spend a fair amount each year on porta potties. For example, the one I just mentioned in Festival Park, we're going to be paying for that for 6 months or so on a weekly basis. They also provide mosquito control for the city. Mosquito control, the chemicals, there's a larvicide that they actually put in standing water. And there's also an adulticide, and that's the machine that you see driving around the city spraying out the back. Chemicals cost a lot of money. Fertilizer, fungicide, and insecticide for the ball fields. That's what kind of makes up that 181,000.
Can you go
Yes, ma'am.
back to the maintenance of structures and equipment? That's a $20,000 increase. What, I missed that, if you said that.
No, ma'am, I didn't. I apologize. Typically, and I'd have to refer to Pam to see exactly what made up that 20, but typically those numbers fluctuate 10 to 20,000 depending on what's going to be replaced or fixed the next year. I'm giving an example for this year. We had 2 fences that were up for replacement. So that's, I can find out the details of that and email it to you unless Pam knows offhand.
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
Would that be acceptable?
Sure. I'm
Okay.
just curious whether it's fences or another mower or,
So the mowers and the vehicles are on an equipment replacement schedule. So that number doesn't change every year. It's 3 mowers for parks, 1 for cemetery. And then the trucks are on a replacement schedule as well. So that number stays pretty consistent. This would be a facility improvement. New picnic tables, a roof on a pavilion, kind of that one-time expense item is typically what goes into that.
thank you.
The Recreation Department proposed revenue. Historically, Recreation Department had gotten up to about $200,000 annually, and they held pretty tight to that for several years in a row, and then obviously you can see that it dropped. We all know why that revenue dropped. The positive is that when the revenue dropped, so did the expenses. So there's what it cost us to put on youth volleyball is what we're bringing in revenue. So we try to make that just an even swap so that we're not overcharging the citizens, but we're also not trying to make money off of them as well. We are seeing a slow return in these activities, and so we fully expect that next year, because we'll have had half a year this year, that next year we'll be able to get back to that, $200,000 level. The reason our youth sports number was so low is we didn't have youth basketball. Youth basketball is one of our biggest sporting events for the youth, and that's why that number is so low. The positive is youth soccer, which is not a city thing, but youth soccer went from 325 roughly pretty consistently to over 500 this year. And so we're really hoping to be able to kind of jump on that bandwagon of youth sports on the upswing. At the same time, adult sports are on the downswing. It's a nationwide trend. We don't know why. If we did, we'd be rich, but we're not expecting as much revenue from the adult sports and kind of made up on the youth sports side. You can see on facility rentals, our numbers are really down. The positive side is we are booked solid for the next 2 months on Park Pavilions and Liberty Hall rentals. And then about half of each month throughout the rest of the calendar year are also booked. So I think that as each month goes, that next month is going to be booked. And so we should see a steady revenue stream for the rest of the year. Here's what I was referencing on the decrease of expenditures. If you look on supplies and materials, that 23,000, but we're proposing 40. Well, we didn't have to spend money on jerseys, volleyball nets, kickballs, softball bases, those kinds of expenditures. And under contractual services, the reason why that number is almost in half is that's where we pay our instructors, our umpires, our referees. And the way our instructor fee works is they receive 75% of whatever that fee is, and then the city takes the 25%. And that 25% kind of covers our basketballs, our baseball, or whatever the equipment is that's going to be needed. Animal services proposed revenue. There's not a lot of change here, but I'll tell you that Teresa and her staff, they're also wrapping up a fee study. And so there will be a proposal back to you in the next several months at some point. I don't want to put her under a gun and say it by a specific month or a meeting. But one of the things that was interesting coming out of that is our current ordinance requires you to license your animal, your cat, your dog, your ferret, whatever that animal is, requires that you go and register your animal with animal services on an annual basis. Well, it's really tough to remember to do that. I mean, when that ordinance was implemented, I went and I registered my 2 dogs and my 1 cat, and I forgot the next year. It wasn't that I was trying to avoid it, I simply didn't remember to do it. And on the staff side, it's really hard for them to remind you to come do it because you may have moved. You may have given up your animal may have died, whatever that case might be. And so we're seeing a lot of cities are going to a microchip fee. It's a one-time, and it helps them on the outside when your animal gets loose, they can scan it and know exactly who it belongs to. And so that's one of the things that will most likely be in front of you is to eliminate that licensing fee, but institute a mandatory microchip fee. So there'll be a little bit of swapping in the numbers. For the proposed budget, I want to kind of brag on the Humane Society, the Nacogdoches County Humane Society. They have a very large direct and indirect benefit to the city. On an annual basis, they provide $28,000 worth of reduced spay and neuter cost to people who adopt. They've also, the direct cost is this year they've spent $3,800 in emergency vet bills. So when Teresa and her crew pick up an animal that they can't take it back to the shelter, they need to take it straight to a vet, that's where that kicks in. And they have provided half of the cost. So if it's a $100 fee, they pay $50, we pay $50. But they've also provided free adoptions at the tune of $3,000. So without that $28,000 in reduced spay and neuter cost and that $3,000 adoption fee, their numbers would be much higher. And their goal is to have 100% live exits and 0 euthanasias. So the Humane Society provides a huge benefit there. Under maintenance and structure equipment, that $16,000, that's an increase. So that $14,000 was from some facility maintenance that they needed to do the floors that I mentioned earlier. And then the $16,000 this year, the reason why that jumped again is right now all of their traps and their cages either sit in the bed of their truck or they sit outside. Well, it's a costly thing to replace your cages and your traps on a regular basis. Well, if they can provide a cover for those, we can prolong the life of those. And so it's a spend a little bit now to save more money down the road. Contractual services. They've had some AC issues out there this year. That's part of the reason why that number went up so high. And then next year, the reason why it's high is they are being brought onto the city's fiber network. So right now, they're on a standalone, just like your residential home connection on your telephone. That's the connection that they're on. Public library, you can see their numbers are pretty consistent. Kind kind of like with the Humane Society, brag about the Friends of the Nacogdoches Library. This isn't money that Pam can necessarily budget every year because they might not donate $17,000 that's on here, but they've said, hey, we're most likely going to donate about $17,000 this year. And you can see they've consistently donated about that amount of money. And they designate what that goes for. It's typically print materials or audio materials. And the library collection right now is growing quite rapidly on the audio front, whether it's audiobooks or ebooks. On their proposed budget, once again, not much really changes here except for the contractual services. SFA and the city share an online catalog system. So we're very fortunate that SFA has a system that allows us to be a partner in it. So SFA owns the system and we pay them for like a user fee essentially. Well, they changed their provider and that fee went up this year. And so that's why our fee went up. And that's what really makes up that difference in contractual services.
What about the difference in maintenance of structures and equipment?
I have that. That is painting, the meeting room and the interior of the library, which was, those two together were about $8,600.
Thank you.
Historic Sites Main Street proposed revenue. You see this is about a $50,000 a year in the Main Street Sundry account. That is what funds the wine swirl, lights, Christmas decorations, Christmas donations. So that's the money that we bring in and then we turn around and we use on those same items. And the reason why there's an asterisk underneath that Zion Hill revenue is $9,300. We haven't brought you a fee schedule yet. You know, we're still trying to figure out what that rental fee looks like for the potential use of Zion Hill. But Jessica Sal has done a lot of work and feels pretty confident that it's going to be in that $9,000 range. Hopefully it's more, but we didn't want to tell Pam that it was going to be 15 and it ended up being 9. So this is a pretty conservative effort here.
Are we pretty sure that it's going to be finished by July of 2022?
Yes, ma'am, it will be finished in 2022, summer. I know Jan does a good job of recording these minutes, so I didn't want to say, yes, it'll be done by July. But we're still a little too far. I mean, we're still a year out, so it's really hard to predict whether we're going to be on schedule at this time or not. You know, come this spring, we'll have a much better idea.
But it looks pretty good right now.
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
I can see all the work being done.
They're there every day.
It's exciting.
Proposed budget for historic sites in Main Street. You see that asterisk down at the bottom, combined Main Street, historic sites, and communication. These numbers are going to be all over the place. You can see that, they're right there in front of you. That's because we combined several different functions into one. And so some of those things we didn't need, they were duplicated, so we were able to reduce. And there were some things that increased, and so that's why the numbers look like a roller coaster. I can tell you only specifically a couple of them under maintenance, structure, and equipment. The reason why we went from 9,000 to 26,000 this year is we had 3 air conditioners break. 2 at Durst Taylor?
Yes.
2 at Durst Taylor and 1 at Stern Huya. And then next year, that 19,000 is partially made up of, we have a request to help fund part of the lights downtown. They're on all of the trees. So there's a $5,000 cost to maintain those on a monthly basis. You know, those crepe myrtles grow pretty fast. And if you don't loosen the lights and then restring them, it actually girdles the tree and it can kill the tree. And so there's a time-consuming effort to that. There's also a fee in there for having a contractor come in and install a Christmas garland. That's something that has historically been done by volunteers. Well, then volunteers kind of waned, and then city staff. Well, that's a lot of work on top of what the street department or the parks department already do. And so we have a proposal in there to also pay a contractor to come do that. And then those wonderful copper gutters at the railroad depot, they need to be replaced. And so there's a significant, I think, $3,000 fee associated with replacing those gutters. And then the reason why contractual services in 1920 is so low is that includes travel and training. There wasn't a whole lot of travel and training taking place in that 1920 budget. And then here for the supplemental package request. The city currently has a city gardener. It's a part-time position. Y'all have probably seen Christy riding around on her little mule downtown. She does a phenomenal job, and this is not a way of saying, hey, we want to do away with Christy. It's we are wanting to create a full-time position and call it a horticulturalist. So that $69,714 isn't all new money. That's some money that we are currently spending on that part-time, and then I don't know what that balance is, but that's what the total impact would be. Part-time cemetery assistant for the cemetery office out at Sunset. If you've ever been out there, you've most likely encountered a locked door and a sign that says, "We're on the grounds, please call," which is actually my office number. And so I talk to a lot of people who are there at the cemetery and say, "Hey, I'm outside your office." Well, I'm not there, but let me find someone. And so it's purely a customer service thing, is we want to be able to provide set hours to where we know that there's going to be somebody in the office, because the three gentlemen who maintain the cemetery department, that's all of the cemeteries, they have to travel. They have to go to Oak Grove, they have to go to Pine Grove, they have to go to Zion Hill. So they're constantly moving, and this would allow us to have someone there at the office. Mausoleum roof repairs, just like the house you live in, I mean, roofing needs to be replaced, and it's time for the mausoleum roof to be replaced. It's the original one, it's the second one from the original construction, which it was originally built in the 50s. Dump truck. The dump truck that we're asking to replace is from 97? It's the 1997 model, and it is well past its time to be replaced. And talking with Hector, who's the parks supervisor back there, he's not sure it would even pass its next inspection. So that's the level of need for that. Tractor with a grapple. That's the arm you see. You go out in front of a tractor and you grab a tree trunk and you move it. That's a piece of equipment that would aid in the Parks Department being able to clean up our parks. Lobby and restroom counters at the Recreation Center. The counters that are at the front desk of the Recreation Center and the restrooms are the original ones from the remodel in the 90s. They're still functioning. They're old, and they're starting to show their age. A generator for animal services. Just like we have a generator at the Recreation Center library for when we're a shelter, the Animal Services Department needs a generator so that if the power goes out in the winter on a Saturday and nobody's there, Teresa and her crew have no idea. And so this is something for animal care that we need to do. They did not lose any animals during the ice storm, which that's a kudos to them, but they were there. Teresa and her staff slept there to maintain the level of care. Floor resurfacing, I mentioned that earlier. That's part of what we did this year, and we're requesting to do the balance of that in this next year. Full-time adoption and rescue coordinator. One of the things that came out of COVID was, since their doors were locked, the front desk person had more time to be a coordinator. So they were calling the different rescue organizations, and that's part of why their live exits went up so high this year. And that's what that person's job would be, is to maintain that level of connection with the foster and the rescue organizations. Curator of collections and education for historic sites. We have a wonderful collection of items in our museums, but it takes someone to care for them. We have to oversee their care. There's also, Jessica's looking at doing a loan program for some traveling exhibits. This person would also be in charge of overseeing that loan program. Zion Hill staff, it's kind of self-explanatory. When we open the building, we need a body to be there to be able to greet the public and do the rentals. And then those last two are additional part-time museum assistants, because one person in a building doesn't fully staff it. They get sick, they go on vacation. There are still holes that need to be plugged in. So Mayor, I know that was a lot in a really short time period, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you or council may have.
Start, Ms. Bellinger?
I just have a small question about equipment, and it seems like some of our equipment is on a schedule for repairing and replacement, and then other equipment is not. Can you help me out with that?
Pam will yell at me if I get this wrong, so hopefully I don't.
She looks pretty nice.
So several years ago, and I don't know how many years ago, all new equipment that was purchased was depreciated and those funds set aside for replacement. Like that dump truck, that was purchased well before we had that account set up. And so that's why you'll see some items come up that are not in that replacement fund and other ones that are in the replacement fund. So we didn't go back and fully fund every piece of equipment. It was only from that point forward new equipment.
Well, that question relates to different departments, because I've seen that come up, so.
Yes,
thank you,
ma'am.
Right, explaining that.
Nothing else? Mr. Belden?
have one question that goes back to animal services. Euthanize, I really don't like to hear that word, but anyway, is there the adoption locally? But is there a nationwide adoption tool or services that we use? And if we do, is there a particular animal that if it's nationwide, people are looking for?
I may have to reference Teresa on this, but there are different rescue groups that are breed specific. And I think that's kind of what you're getting to.
Right, exactly.
And Teresa and her staff, they don't have 100% of them, but they have a lot of contacts. I know there was an animal a year ago that a rescue group out of New Jersey really wanted, and they actually paid for the animal to be flown from Nacogdoches to New Jersey. So they are in contact with a lot of those rescue organizations.
Thank you.
And I've got a question about the shelter itself. Now, will we have to replace the shelter with I-69? Is that still a thing, or is that?
Yes, sir, at some point in the future, the route for I-69 through that section hasn't been nailed down as 100%. So at some point in the future, yes, sir, we will need to replace the Animal Services Center because of I-69, but also it's an aging facility. And it was built with a different model in mind, and it was more of just to bring the animals in and keep them and then exit them. That's not the model that we have today. So for kind of both of those reasons, in the near future, next several years, we will need to replace that building.
So our plan for funding would be get money from condemnation by the.
I don't have a plan for you, sir.
Yeah, okay. Fisher.
Just really impressive, all the work that you guys do and all the programs that you put on for the community, and I appreciate you and your staff's work.
The managers do a great job.
You,
No questions for me, no. Thank you.
I have one
Okay.
more. I was just wondering, I understand the Bright Foundation was setting aside some money to complete the trail on, is it Bonita Creek, in Francis Schaffner's memory? I'm wondering where that is and
So,
what's.
yes, ma'am. So there was, the Bright Foundation gave the Friends of Historic Nacogdoches Incorporated through the Trails Committee. So it was given to the Trails Committee, but held under FONY for the city. So it's kind of that weird zigzag pattern. And we've bid that project out twice, and it's for Lenana Creek, and it's on the northern section where you take Maroney straight across. The city, and I'm sorry for the long answer, but the city, through a grant of Texas Parks and Wildlife, has completed a trail from Maroney back to Austin. And then our next part of that grant is to build a parking lot. And then the Francis Schaffner Memorial Loop goes north from that parking lot. So we've bid out twice that project. The first time we received no bids. So we repackaged it. We made some tweaks thinking maybe that there was a problem with the bid. We rebid it again. We received one bid, and it was, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it was way in excess of what we had estimated it to be. And so Clayton Collier is the head of that trails group. So Clayton and I have been in discussion about how do we redo this trail so that we can still get it done within available funds. So
Do we have a time frame on it or anything? I would hate to see those funds go away too, so
No,
for not being used.
Clayton and I will have another bid package. It's going to look completely different than the one that we've put out twice before. We will have it out this year, but I don't have a month. I mean, Clayton is a volunteer, so I'm wanting to get a lot of his input because they have the buy-in from it. I mean, we could on the city staff, just say, here's the packet, but it doesn't go over too well with that trails group.
Oh, thank you for clarifying.
Yes,
that.
ma'am.
You mentioned volunteer. Full-time Zion Hill staff person?
Yes, sir.
Is there a chance that you could have a coordinator for the Zion Hill Church, but be staffed by volunteers?
There's always a possibility to do that. It is not likely that we would be able to accomplish it. So volunteer basis has been diminishing all across the United States. The CVB, volunteer base has also dwindled over the last several years. The Historic Sites Department, as it sits today, used to have several dedicated volunteers. When I was in that role, I went and made lots of presentations to retired teachers organizations, et cetera. And the desire for people to volunteer in the way that they used to is not there. So yes, we can partially staff that at times with volunteers, but it's really hard to count on them to be there, to open the museum, to take Mayor Mize's deposit for his daughter's wedding. Or, that's a large responsibility to place on the shoulders of a volunteer.
And I understand about the need for volunteers. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, receive a report, have a discussion, and provide direction regarding supplemental budget requests for new programming and services. Finance
Well,
Director.
we're gonna,
We're
we're
not
gonna
there?
back up. No,
Okay.
not quite. I am very hurriedly going to go through all of the departments in City Hall. We, decided that, in the interest of time, that we would combine all of our departments. We all, were affected pretty much the same by COVID, being in City Hall. We've kind of had the same experiences. So I'm gonna kind of rush through this a little bit. You have all the detail in front of you. I'm not gonna go through every accomplishment, or every goal, but I'm gonna try to hit the high points for y'all. To start with finance, this year, we did receive our Government Finance Officers Association Award for our audit. I have kind of lost count. I think that is 13 or 14 years in a row that we have received that award, and so it's something that we're really proud of across the board, because there's a lot of work that goes into, from all departments, into our audit each year. Actually, this past year, you approved a new position for procurement. We disbanded the procurement department several years ago, and we have run into quite a few difficulties having each of the departments run their own purchasing division. There are lots of state laws that we have to comply with, and so we actually have that job open now. We have a couple of really good applicants that I hope, once we get through the draft budget next week, that I'm able to start interviewing for that position. Also, this year, we transferred payroll from HR to finance. That was at the request a couple of times of the auditors. We were written up, if you'll remember, a couple of years in a row for internal control issues, because payroll and HR being in the same department with a very limited number of employees, there was not the internal control that the auditors would have preferred. So we have transferred that. We're in the process right now. They are training, Brittany is training Buck Rainey, my accountant, and he's going to be taking over payroll full-time as soon as we get him trained. For future goals, of course, this past year, we had quite a few employees retire. We had a couple of openings for, like I said, the procurement. We saw the need for cross-training, because we all were having to pick up and do a lot of things that maybe we didn't really know what we were doing, so we've all had to learn a lot on the fly. And so I think at the end of the day, it's going to help the department out tremendously. We are looking at implementing some timekeeping software to enhance efficiency citywide. This year with COVID, that became an issue, because we were all having to congregate in various areas, whereas if we had time clock software that they could have checked in on the fly, then we would not have had to have, all the sanitation drivers in one area clocking in, and then we have several of them that are out with COVID. So that did happen, so we're looking at doing some of that. For the city secretary, the one big item that I think Jan was able to accomplish this year was the agenda management software implementation. I think that has really helped each of the departments prepare better agendas, better AISs for you, and you have access, I hope now, in a more timely fashion. She also was very, very busy this year, was something for her with the hiring of the city manager and then the city attorney. And then we've had retreats that we haven't had in several years. So Jan stayed very busy this year. As far as goals for her for next year, she has decided that we really do need to do some staff training across the board for our records retention. I think she said we have in excess of 300,000 documents in our Laserfish folders. Some of those are past retention periods. So there needs to be some across the board training on Laserfish. She is in the process of updating open records request policies and the city board and committee's handbook. So she does have her plate full. For human resources, this past year, they were able to implement a compensation pay system. If you'll recall, we implemented that in January, phase 1 of that. Phase 2 of that will be the creation and implementation of a performance management system. I think at this point, we are working with a consultant to kind of finalize those pieces of that performance management system, because we will be implementing a new merit system with next budget year. Some future goals is to implement new HR technology. Right now, everything is paper-driven in HR. We would like to push not only new applicants online, but existing employees should be able to do updating W-4s or I-9s or, changing addresses. We want to do all that through the system, but we also want to be able to do, departments do employee evaluations through the system. And so that is something that they're looking at for the future. Creating and implementing a system-wide succession plan and provide additional training and employee development. Citywide, we have individuals that receive training in their work areas, but we need HIPAA compliance training. We need diversity training. There's a lot of things that we need to touch on that we have not been able to do in the last few years, and so that is a big initiative for the HR department. And of course, increasing recruitment and retention initiatives. That has been a very big issue in the last year or so, finding people for the positions that we have open and retaining the ones that we do get. So they have a lot on their plate as well. Information technology. There we go. So this past year, accomplishments, the IT department, of course, was very busy trying to create the ability for us to continue with business as usual, creating these hybrid meetings, doing the Zooms and those types of things. Sounds like it would be very simple, but it was citywide and lots of departments and lots of boards, and so there was a lot of work in that area, and so they have successfully transitioned us to a hybrid meeting, and hopefully has kind of changed the way we do business going forward. They also, of course, that WFH is work from home. I learned that. So during COVID, we did have a lot of folks that had to work from home, and so there was a good bit of preparation in order to ensure that there was security. With the access to the city's network, there was a good bit of work there. For future goals, they are working on a refresh of the city website. There are constantly network infrastructure upgrades. I think Brian mentioned the internet access for several of our areas outside of City Hall are being upgraded currently. They're in the works to upgrade a city phone system. I think our phone system is in excess of 20 years old. That bid just came in not long ago, so they have a lot on their plate as well. Utility billing, I will say that probably the one thing that I'm really proud of them as their supervisor is during the storm, they, within a matter of a few days, had 700 water shutoffs, and this is around the clock. People, of course, as things started popping here, there, and yonder, there were lots and lots and lots of phone calls. We were sending people as we could get them there. Our employees were having the same difficulties everybody else getting around town. They actually became, trying to call and talk people through how to turn the water off themselves if they were able to. And so they kind of shifted focus that week, and I was really impressed with the level of work that they had to put in as well. Some future goals for utility billing. We have been offering customers the ability to apply for services. We have been looking to apply for services online. That is something that I know a lot of other utilities have done. We have kind of been slow to that, only because we have an issue with identity protection, and so we're looking at ways that we can make that a little more user friendly, so that people do not have to come into the water office to actually sign up for service. And of course, I know it sounds strange that our automated meter reading system has been in the ground for 12, 13 years now. Seems like yesterday. So we are at the point where we are looking at replacing those aging meters and transmitters in that system. Okay, so the next few slides, this is basically just kind of a reiteration of some of the things that we came across this year. Like I mentioned before, City Secretary would like to improve the city's record management system, which is Laserfish. She also is working on ways to create a central point for access phone calls, knowing that we don't have a central lobby area here, people kind of wander, and then with phone calls kind of get bounced around. And so we're working through how to handle those items. And so those are some issues that have come across her desk, and we're working through those areas. Finance, of course, I mentioned one of our big challenges is the state and local purchasing guidelines and making sure that we are in compliance. Without a central purchasing employee, that has been a very challenging, to say the least. But hopefully within the next year, when we get that person up and running, that should alleviate that problem. Of course, payroll being transferred, and like I said, we had several staff vacancies because we had multiple retirements in our department. Human resources, honestly, the human resources area right now, same situation. They are running with one full-time employee. We are down 2. We have an HR director and HR manager position open. She is also not only running the HR department alone, she is trying to train one of my employees on payroll. So right now, operationally, HR is struggling just to make sure that they can keep things done in a timely manner, and Brittany, keep saying she. Brittany has done a wonderful job of keeping that department afloat. We have, like I said, worked with a consultant to develop a performance management system, and we're in the middle of that. That will be the second component of our recently adopted compensation system. IT, of course, technology has changed tremendously over time. We have 3 employees in our IT department. We had 3 employees in our IT department when I came here 25 years ago. And so we came here 25 years ago, and not everyone had a computer, and not everyone had email access. And so as the IT world has blossomed, they have continued to work with those same 3 employees. So they have done a lot. Now, it is IT, so they learn how to creatively do things with computers that instead of people. And so they've done a lot, but it's hard to keep up with the pace of IT changes. And so that is definitely something that they have to work through. Let's see. Oh yeah, another thing, they have worked through a help desk ticket system so that if I have an issue in the finance department, I can send them an email and it will create a ticket in their system so that they can track who, otherwise they're just going here, there, and yonder all day. So they have worked on that, and that has been an issue for them in the past. Utility billing, once again, aging meters and transmitters, the AMR system. We were one of the first in the state to have the radio read AMR system. We implemented that in 2008. And so we are at the point where it's time to start looking at the replacement of those meters and transmitters. That will be something that will be built into a future CIP request as well. That's about 13,000 meters, as a matter of fact. So it's a very time-consuming and very expensive effort. I believe the early estimates are about $4.5 million. But the initial work was about $8.5 million, so guess it's on sale. No. And so utility billing, I guess during the pandemic, we anticipated having a lot of customers request either payment plans or something of that nature with so many people out of work. We did have quite a few payment plans put in place, but I am happy to say that for the most part, our customers have paid their bills consistently. Our write-offs were no larger this year than they have been any of the years past. Our turn-offs are about the same. So people, they may not have been paying some bills, but they were paying their water bills. So that was good for us. Service level changes pre and post-COVID. This is pretty much the same for all of our departments. Prior to COVID, we did everything in-house. Come see us. We'll help you. Come see us. And so now we're pushing everything to online. So that whether that be coming in to make payments on hotel motel taxes. Now we have an ability for them to file those taxes electronically. Signing up for water service. There's things that we have had to transition, and so that goes for every department within City Hall.
Can I ask a question real
Yes,
quick?
yes.
You mentioned that the water turnoffs have been about the same during COVID. Did your policy on water service turnoff change during COVID?
During the initial, I would say, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 months, but Marchish, spring of 2020, we did not penalize for late payment during those first few weeks. And so but honestly, people were paying anyway, but we did not penalize for late payment. So I think that total cost was probably less than $40,000 in lost revenue, but we did not penalize for those first, because we were closed, City Hall was closed for a good bit of time. But yeah, after that, it was just for the initial time frame of the pandemic, and then everything has been back to normal since then.
The details on the water service turnoff procedure, how does it go? Do you get a warning and then a second warning and then a turnoff?
Yes, so when your bill is not paid by the due date, our system generates a late notice, okay? And so that is mailed out, and we legally cannot disconnect service until they've had at least a 45-day waiting period, which we never do it right at 45 days. The ones that are scheduled for disconnect they receive a door hanger if it's not a significant amount of time. So I would say they get their regular bill, and then within probably 5 days of their past due date, they'll get their second reminder bill that tells them you have 15 days to make payment or you're subject to disconnection.
Okay, and that procedure did not change?
That did not change. We just did not disconnect. During that time,
During the first few weeks?
Yes.
But then after that,
and then we went back to normal. But at the first, and I really honestly, I can't remember if it was 6 weeks or a month. I don't know. I don't really know the time frame, but we did not disconnect.
Okay.
And we didn't charge the late notice, the late fee.
Is that the same process if you pay online?
I'm sorry?
Is that the same process if you pay online? Or do the notice goes out online that you're past due?
No, if the bill is not paid, regardless of how they paid it, where they can come in, they can pay it online, they can pay it at Kroger. If it's not paid by that due date and posted to their account, then the system automatically generates them a past due notice. So if they paid it at Kroger, as long as they paid it before the due date, and we posted to because we post on a daily basis. So if they paid it at Kroger this afternoon, it will be posted tomorrow morning. And so as long as those payments weren't made by the due date, then that's when the notice gets generated.
Okay, let me ask this separately. I pay my bill online. If I don't pay it by the due date and it goes 5 days, 10 days, do I get a notice online or you send a paper copy?
No, well, you can sign up to have your regular bills sent by email, but I would say probably 95% of them are going to be paper bills.
Okay, because I do get the notice online.
Yeah. And that depends, because you could have opted in for that years ago when we very first set that up, because we do have some people that prefer everything by email. And we try to every few years send out that notice. If you want to get your bills and notices by electronic, you can.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So our full-time employee summary, city manager, city secretary, 2, that will not be changing, 2. Finance, we have 6 and 1 vacant. That vacant position is, like I said earlier, the procurement specialist. HR, 3, and 2 of those are vacant currently, the director and the manager position. The legal department is 2, and 1 is vacant, and that is the legal assistant. Information technology has 3 employees, and utility billing has 9 full-time employees. That includes cashiers and service techs. City Secretary proposed budget, there's not a lot of change here. This is a very consistent budget. The one item you'll see is the maintenance of equipment. That $7,600 is the annual maintenance cost on the Civic Clerk software. And so that will be increased this year. Contractual services increase is about $3,500. So that is some additional training and an increase in the amount for the codification of the Code of Ordinances. Financial services budget, we have went through some restructuring this year, eliminating a couple of positions and combining positions. And so our personnel cost, even with the compensation plan and a 1% COLA, is actually scheduled to go down this year. Our supplies and materials, the same thing as well. We've done some combining of efforts, and so we're going to see a decrease in several areas. Contractual services, the current year budget stands at $61,000. That was for a couple of contracts that we had for special services. We had a couple of audits that we had done or are planning to do. So those were one-time occurrences, and so for the most part, the finance department budget, as you'll see, is going to go down about $35,000 next year. Human resources, personnel services, that includes the compensation study and the salary study implementation and the cost of living adjustment that is proposed. Supplies and materials are relatively flat. Contractual services, here again, the current year includes a contract for HIPAA compliance and citywide training. That was a one-time occurrence, so that is why the contractual services will be going down for 21-22. On IT, personnel again is the implementation of the compensation plan. Supplies and materials are relatively flat. Office equipment and IT maintenance, that is a lot of maintenance contracts on various hardware and software. IT being, if it's not specific to a department, if it runs multiple departments, for instance, our financial software, all departments use that. So the maintenance contract on that is housed in the IT department. And there were, of course, some increases. We have usually 2 to 3% increase escalator in most of those maintenance contracts. Let's see, contractual services, there again, it's going down, and one of those was last year we had budgeted about $6,000 for some state mandated IT security training. We were able to accomplish that this year, and so every employee periodically has to take security training, and then for next year, we have found a free service through the state, so we will not be having to continue that $6,000 on an annual basis. Utility billing, let's see, the main changes there are going to be in maintenance structures and equipment. The majority of that is meter replacement. Last year we had budgeted $175,000 to replace aging and stopped up meters. Next year we have upped that to $200,000 to reflect what we're actually spending, and that is an increase in cost and the increase in the number that we're having to change out for the age of the system. And then, yeah, so contractual services are relatively flat. I'm not sure what $7,000 is, but I could find that out for you if I need to. Supplemental packages, HR and finance both have some software that we would like to purchase that will not only enhance the online offerings, but kind of coordinate payroll, this timekeeping software, its scheduling software, and again, the evaluation, HR technology encompasses the evaluation system. And then some replacement servers for, IT requested these for Spillman and WatchGuard, which is at the police department, and Microsoft licensing user management services. So, very fast, that was a lot of information. Do y'all have any questions?
Mr. Anderson, anything?
Not at this point, no.
Okay, Ms. Fisher?
I noticed in a couple of the personnel budget you didn't budget for any additional personnel, even though it was showing that there are staff vacancies.
No, they're budgeted, they're just not filled currently. They've been in the budget, so
Oh, they were in the prior.
they're in the current budget, we just haven't been able to fill the
Okay.
position, right, right.
So we-
And
so
they're advertised, they're just not filled.
If we, was say fortunate enough, several people walk into staff vacancies, that's already been funded.
That's already funded, yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Bellinger?
The compensation system, and pay increases, can you briefly tell me what it was? I wasn't on council when.
Okay, so last year, we contracted with a company to come in and do I want to say, a real salary study. What they did is they took each of our positions, they looked at our, job descriptions, not just necessarily at the title, but took the job descriptions and then compared them to certain market cities. And so depending on what they were able to find, there were various cities in the area and with the same, demographics as Nacogdoches. And then what they were able to present to us was, here's what the market pays for, let's just say, a finance director. And so they would have all of the cities and what their minimum and maximum salary ranges were at those cities. Prior to this, we didn't have those ranges. We just had what everybody made. So there was no pay grade system here at the city of Nacogdoches. So what we created was, using those salary data, we got everyone to at least the market minimum. Now, where you want to be eventually is at least to that midpoint, but we had so many employees that were being paid less than the market minimum. And so that was the first step, was to get all of our employees to at least the minimum of what the market data said, okay? And so we did that, it was effective with the first paycheck in January. And so that was kind of the first step. The second step is implementing a merit pay system to move within those pay grades that we now have set up. And so that's what we're in the process of now, is working with a consultant to work through those employee evaluations to make it fair how you work through that merit system. And so that's we're in phase 2 of that right now.
So roughly, what was the increase in the salaries, just
So,
ballpark?
what we did is we did it at a mid-year point, and so we did from January to September. And I can get you specifics, but in my mind, I want to say that the general fund portion was about $700,000. Does that ring a bell? For 3/4 of the year. We had quite a few positions that were under market. It was another thing that we accomplished with that, is we set a minimum wage for the city at $12.70 an hour. And so we were able to implement that as well. And so there were a couple of pieces to that, but yes, I can get you some detail on total cost. Because like I said, we just did it mid-year, so it's not necessarily a full year picture, which is another reason that this year's budgets, you're gonna see some increase, because last year we only budgeted for 3/4 of a year.
And in this compensation package, does it have recurring increases for next year and the year after?
That's phase 2, the merit pay system that we're going to be implementing, and the way to move through those pay grades is on a merit system. So with those evaluations, you will be either recommended for a merit, 1%, 2%, whatever we draft within that policy, and that's how you'll move through those pay grades.
Thank you.
Just one quick, it's not a question, by the way.
Okay.
It's just a note. Friday updates. It's becoming very popular, and at one time, it was not information about job openings, but the secretary was kind enough to add those on there, and it's been very helpful for a lot of citizens.
Good, awesome. Well, good deal. We'll make sure that Brittany keeps doing that for you. Okay, so I'm through with this one unless y'all have other questions. And we'll-
Okay, we done with questions on that one? Okay, now for the next one, I'd like to start our regular meeting at 5:30, so we've got about 15 minutes.
Okay.
We can stop now. I can give you about 10 minutes, and then we can break for about 5 minutes before our next meeting, and then finish after the meeting tonight, so.
Start, or you wanna?
Well, why don't we go ahead and, there's a lot to cover, and I'd like to get input from the council. So, why don't we at least cover the fire truck?
Okay.
if we can.
Okay.
Because that's a good breaking point, because that's a need that we have, and I'd like to get some direction from council. And then we could recess, and that way we can go ahead and start the regular meeting and then bring that item back to finish the rest of it. That's okay.
This is gonna be extremely difficult to read on your screen, so I did print this out for y'all. So the fire chief had spoken with y'all last meeting regarding the need for replacement of the ladder truck. And I had told you at that point that we were gonna look at different financing options. And so we do have a little bit of information for you here. If we decide to pay for cash, then the full 1.5 would come out of reserves. If we decide to lease the ladder truck, we can do a 7-year lease. It's at 2.41%, and the annual recurring operation cost would be $224,000. Now, that is an operating expense, and so it would have to be covered with current operating revenues, which at this point, we do not have additional revenues to cover $224,000 worth of lease payments. So the third option is to issue a tax note. We called and talked to our financial advisors about either a CO or a tax note, and the tax note is definitely the route to go. A 7-year tax note would be at 1% interest, and the annual cost for that would be $223,000. If y'all remember, we have a tax note that is paying off in the next year for our radio system, which was $1.6 million originally. It was a 6-year tax note, and it will be coming off the debt service schedule in September of 2022. So this would be almost a like-for-like change. This would be paid for with the debt service portion of the property tax. So at this point, Mario and I have discussed this, and I feel like the most economical and efficient way for us to proceed would be to issue the tax note at 1% for a 7-year term, and that would be paid for, covered with the property tax portion, the debt service portion of your property tax rate. But now, like I said, we do have the option to do a lease or to purchase it outright with cash. And so those are kind of the financing options on it. Chief Keith is here. Yes, there he is. Did you want to tell them about the vehicle itself, which route? I know we had talked about the demo and what this one would actually be.
Absolutely. So last week during my budget presentation, when I threw rocks at you all and unexpectedly told you about this expenditure, we had sort of 3 options. And we have narrowed that down. We had 2 of our captains on the truck committee went and actually looked at the demonstrator truck. That was the nicer truck than we typically would buy. And we've got good solid pricing. That truck is pricing about $50,000 less than the truck we would traditionally buy because of the discounts, because it's a demonstrator. One of those captains left Nacogdoches to go to the Dallas-Fort Worth area to look at the truck, absolutely wanting to order a new truck. The other left thinking we should buy the demo, and after spending about 4 hours inspecting the truck, they both called with no reservations about the demo and said that's absolutely the route we need to go. The big option is that demonstrator will be available within 3 to 4 weeks, and so we won't be talking about a rental or buying a used truck or trying to patch up what we have, as opposed to maybe February or March if we were to order one. So the demonstrator is readily available. It'll be here quickly, and the consensus certainly at the fire department is that that's the right answer. Any questions?
Yes. Now, if we do purchase the demo, is there any additional charges or funds needed to fit your need for that demo truck?
No, sir. So when we had them price it, we priced it with all of the additional options that we would typically put. So compartment dividers and slide out trays and the things that we would have put in the truck. We had that added in, and so that the price, as it came back, was considerably lower. And so if you want us to kind of continue going down this road, then I would bring back a complete package at the August 3rd council meeting for your review and approval.
But do we have the time? Is this still open to the other cities?
It is still open to anybody in the United States can buy this demonstrator. So at this point, so.
Chief,
Yes, ma'am.
if you would explain why we need this truck, because there's so many people here who are present who didn't hear just briefly.
So So we have one ladder truck in our community. The ladder truck's necessary for ventilation of roofs, for firefighter safety anywhere above grade, and also for evacuating buildings that are on fire. Also for rescues in the creek. This thing will actually go down and go above the creek, so you don't have to put people in the creek to effect rescues. Every time it floods the Lanana Creek, college students think it's a great idea to go to Walmart and buy blow-up dolls and blow up things, and they float down the creek. And so about once a year, we're plucking some kids out. And so this will effectively make our firefighters safer. The reason that this is not just a normal budget presentation for us to fund in the October budget is that our existing ladder truck, which is 25 years old, was involved in a crash a little over a month ago. And the estimate for repairs is $122,000, which exceeds the actual cash value by more than double. And so we fully expect our insurance company to total that vehicle. And so we are right now without a ladder truck. And so, does that answer your question? Absolutely.
And back to the financing, those tax notes can be issued in 6 weeks. So it would be a matter of what we would bring to you would be to purchase that and then issue the tax notes to repay the reserves for that.
So would we take the residual on the existing note that pays off next September and put it with this and
Well,
start
for the
a new one?
for the 21-22 year, there will be a little bit of that 223,000. That will be that 1 year payment will be in addition to what we have out there because it doesn't pay off until September of 22.
You don't pay it off early with your new money and
Well, we
start
wouldn't be
again?
refunding this one. This would be just a whole new tax note.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess at this point, we just need some direction.
Really, what we're looking for, council, is, we're not asking you to buy it tonight. What we're asking is can I give permission, will you give us permission to at least contact, is the manufacturer, or the dealer that works with that we would like to take it off the market because we're interested in the vehicle. If we're not interested, then we'll go down the traditional route, but we need a ladder truck. And we can either get it in November, or we can get it sometime in 2022. And so that's really what we're asking, is to take it off the market because we're interested, and then we'll bring you at a future council meeting, an item for you to do the physical transaction on the purchase, on approving the purchase.
Any comment?
No, I mean, that certainly seems the most logical route to take is get it done as quickly as possible and save the rental cost and.
I agree.
Yeah, if possible, take it off the market right away.
Mm-hmm.
Since this is life and death, I totally agree.
Okay. I think you have consensus, so
Thank you.
let's
And
move
again, keep in
forward.
mind, this is not how we normally would do business, but we are in a position that we just don't have the piece of equipment because of the accident that Chief mentioned. So, and the repairs would have just probably not allowed to happen unless we paid for them ourselves. So we appreciate it, and thank you for having the faith in us to make that happen. So we'll get with Chief and make sure that information is passed on to the manufacturer and the dealer.
I have 3 minutes, I think, so I'm gonna go one. I'm gonna hit one more item on the fire service division, if you don't mind. Chief Kiplinger has requested the ability to apply for a SAFER grant, which would fund 3 firefighters over a 36-month time frame. What this would be, and this $250,000 is kind of an escalated cost of those 3 firefighters with benefits, because the city, if we are awarded this grant, typically there are different levels. Some years it's a 75%, some year it's 90%. Chief Kiplinger thinks that it's very possible that this will be a 100% coverage grant. We would be able to apply for that in the spring. We would know by the end of May. Typically, we're thinking if they run with last year's time frame, that in May that we would know if we were awarded the grant. The stipulation here is that covers for 36 months, and so it's going to pay 100% of the salary and benefits for those firefighters. The kicker here is, since it's a grant funded and it's a full-time position, as soon as that grant expires, then we have to pick up and start carrying those costs in year 4. So what we're looking at is we're not asking y'all to make any effort this year to set aside monies to potentially cover that, but that would be something that we would be coming to you next year if we're awarded this grant, because in the fiscal year 25-26, that whole $250,000 becomes an operational expense of the city if we're going to keep those 3 firefighters on staff. And so, we can raise about $179,000 currently with a 1 cent property tax increase. So at this point, we couldn't even fund that whole thing with a 1 cent property tax increase. So what we're going to suggest is, over time, starting next fiscal year, set aside a portion of a property tax increase to fund that future need of $250,000. And so at this point, there's nothing that we need other than, are you willing for us to apply for the grant? Because it's, like I said, it's a great thing especially if we're funded 3 firefighters for 3 years. Just knowing that in year 4, it does cost the city. And like I said, that's escalated over time with merits and that type of thing to be about $250,000. So I think right now we just want to know if you are interested in us pursuing that grant application in the spring.
Mayor, may I add to, in addition to what Pam's saying, it's not so much that it's going to be a tax increase, it's just a commitment.
Yeah.
From a funding perspective. If you're going to pursue 3 granted positions, at some point in the future, there is a commitment. So we need to start modeling the financial commitment at some point next year. Not next budget year, but the following budget year after. And so that's really the point is, if we're going to go do it, then we need to start financially making commitments down the road so that at the end of the 3 years, it's not a surprise. It should not be a surprise to anyone if we're going to go down this path. That's the point. And if we're not going to do it, then if we're not going to plan for it, then we don't need to pursue a grant that we can't afford and should pay for 3 years down the road.
Ms. Belden?
And we are in need of firemen at this point, aren't we? I would like
I
to
think
guess.
that's
So
what
I'm-
the chief had told us.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Bolden. Absolutely. So based on the study that we had performed last year regarding fire station location and staffing, we're 6 firefighters short if we have a 4-station model of being where we really need to be with regard to ISO. So this additional 3, and then down the road in the future, over a period of years, another 3 on top of that will really get us a lot closer to where we need to be.
Thank you. And I'm in favor of pursuing the grant.
Okay. Ms. Bellinger?
So, I actually would like to get everything in perspective before we go line item by line item, because I'd like to know how much we're talking about in taxes and, what kinds of increases, what kinds of obligations for everything. It's not that I'm sure we need firefighters.
I think we'd all like to see that kind of the wrapped up picture before we make these decisions. So when will we see that tonight? Later?
Your first draft budget will be the first in August.
But from when we finish up this discussion later tonight, will we see that kind of what the proposal is for how much more funding we're going to need?
Yes, yes, that's what the rest of this we were just getting the
Okay.
fire department out of,
I-
all the other needs are coming
Yeah,
later, yes.
I think maybe let's pause and let's go to our other meeting and then we'll take this back up. Okay, we'll resume, and we don't have anyone signed up for open forum. Open forum is a time to speak to items that are not on the agenda tonight. So from that, we will move to items to be removed from the consent agenda. Council, do you have anything that you want to remove from the consent agenda number 6?
No.
Good. Mr. Anderson? Okay. Excuse me, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve consent agenda.
Thank
I'll
you, sir.
second.
And a second. Okay. Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay. We'll move to the regular agenda. And we'll consider approval of the city's partially self-funded health insurance plan and ancillary benefits and authorize the city manager to execute any and all necessary renewal contract documents. And we have Jeff Summers with Bancorp South Insurance Services.
So my name is Brittany Tucker, and I am the HR generalist. And I was just going to introduce Jeff today. Jeff is going to give you the presentation on the benefits for renewal for this next year.
Great. Welcome, Jeff.
Hurry up. Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much for this evening and me able to present to you the benefits renewal for the 2021-2022 plan year. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jeff Summers. I'm with actually BXS Insurance. We changed our name from Bancorp South Insurance a couple of years ago, and so it's BXS Insurance, but we're still the same, Bancorp South Insurance. I want to give you just a brief history of the, let me see if I'm going down, brief history of the plan, and for those of you that know me, have seen this format before. It's fairly similar to last year's format. I do give a background of how the plan is set up. You do offer, obviously, health insurance for the employees and dependents of the city. Blue Cross Blue Shield has been the insurance provider for many years. It's a partially self-insured plan, which means that the city purchases reinsurance and pays administration fees to Blue Cross Blue Shield, but it is a partially self-insured plan, which means that the city on a monthly basis actually pays the claims that are incurred, but there is stop-loss insurance to make sure that the city does not go over any amounts, and I will go over that throughout the presentation. The city also offers ancillary coverages to the employees and dependents, and that includes life, dental, long-term disability, vision insurance. Last year, the city decided to implement an employer-paid dental plan, which means all the employees get dental insurance for free for themselves. And this is the first time that has been implemented, and it's ran really, really well, and I'll go over that again in the presentation as we go through it. But that was something that was added last year, and I think that's been a very welcome benefit to the employees this year. The next page is some claims history. And what I do is I look at a 12-month claims run, so you can actually get an idea of how the plan has ran from one year to the next. And when we did the renewal, we had through May claims, and you'll see that the claims are down significantly on a gross medical claims from where they were last year. And really what that means is there was some very, very large claims from June of 19 through May of 20 that we've not experienced this year. Last year we had one claim that was well over $1.5 million. And so this year we did not have that. We also had one other large claim come off from retirement, and so that really did help the overall gross medical claims come down. And when you see the net medical claims, you may wonder, well, why is that very similar to where it was last year? Well, remember, you buy reinsurance, you buy individual stop loss, so once you reach that stop loss, the city doesn't pay anymore. It gets reimbursed back from Blue Cross Blue Shield. So when you net that out after the reimbursement, you'll see that it's very, very similar on net medical claims paid year over year. It's within a few $100s. So very, very similar overall net medical claims paid year over year that it was last year. You're also going to see pharmacy reduction, which is very nice. We actually did some things over the last couple of years. We changed up the way the actual, what's called a PBM, a pharmacy benefit manager, actually administers the plan. We went to more of a closed formulary versus open formulary, which is a little bit more restrictive, but I think it's been really well received. We made sure we got way out in front of that, so employees knew that if there was going to be a change to their pharmacy or their medicine, that we were way out in front of that before that happened. And that has produced significant savings, I would say. Administration reinsurance costs are also down, which is always a good thing because those are fixed costs. That's something that's going to happen whether you have a claim or not, when you pay Blue Cross to administer the plan and to pay for the reinsurance cost. So overall, year over year, you're down about 5.2%, which is great news. Moving on to some of the other things that I go over, you always like to see the high-cost claimants. And again, this is something that we really pay a lot of attention to throughout the year. We meet quarterly as a committee to make sure that we always know where we are within the plan. And one of the first things we always go to is your high-cost claimants to see where we stand. And like I said last year, we had a couple of claims that were, one was almost $1,700,000, one was at $327,000. You can see all the way down, we stop at $50,000. So this past year, over the last 12 months, we had 12 claimants. This year we have 11, but you'll notice that the top end is not near as heavy as it was last year, which is a good thing. Now, we still have 3 claimants that are still running over $100,000, and so that does get into reinsurance. Okay, so that's when Blue Cross will pay money back to the city. Next page, I think, is another very important page that you would want to look at as a council, and this is your fund balance history. This is how much you have in reserves to pay claims. And I think this has been just great over the last 4 or 5 years. We've tracked this now for, again, 7, 8 years, and this is the highest it's ever been. So we went all the way to June 30th. We were almost as current as we could be, and we're almost touching $1.9 million. And you can see how that's gone up through the years. There was a lean year in 2016 and in 2015. Those were, and I don't know if anyone was on the council then, but it was, those were some difficult decisions that had to be made. But that's what happens when it's partially self-funded. Sometimes you're going to have some better years than others. And to have a really strong fund balance is really, really important. And remember that $1,860,000, because when we get to some maximum claim liability numbers in a minute, I think this will make a lot of sense in what we're trying to do. And I apologize for being so many numbers, but it's basically what this presentation's about is numbers. We'll get to some plan designs, but a lot of it's about numbers. The next is the current funding rate. So this is how much the city actually contributes to each employee, and then how much dependents participate or contribute on either a spouse, children, or family basis. The city offers 2 plans. They offer a base medical plan and a buy-up plan. And you can see that the base plan, the employee pays 0 for employee-only coverage. And that has been the philosophy and the hopes of the city for many, many years. And I know, talking with Mario as a new city manager, and Pam and the rest of the group, that's something that we would love to continue to do, is to have at least free health insurance for employees on a base plan. But the city actually contributes $660 for every single employee, okay? And then again, you'll see what it costs on a monthly basis if you want to add a spouse, children, or family. So when you add the contributions from the city and the employees, that's a little over $3 million, okay? Now that's based on where we sit today in enrollment, and we know that can change a little bit month by month. Doesn't change a lot, but it changes a little bit. The expected cost for the 2020-2021 was $3,256,000. That was what Blue Cross said expected claims should be. And the maximum was going to be $3,762,000. But look what the actual is, 2.8. So we came in well below what Blue Cross thought was going to be the expected number. Okay, so that's good. And Blue Cross is, and most all reinsurance carriers, because this is where it comes from, is on the reinsurance side. They're always a little conservative, but I like that. I think we need to be conservative. We wouldn't want to tell you that we expect the claims next year to be 2.5 when it came in at 2.8. It just wouldn't make any sense. So we want to make sure that we're very conservative in that number when we're looking at this. We would never want to be try to underfund it per se. So then, the recommended funding rates for next year. And I think this is what everybody wants to hear about, is what is the rates, what do we want the rates to do next year? Because you control that. As a council, as a committee, you control what the rates are. There's not set employee only, employee spouse, employee children like there are in the fully insured world. You do that, and we use actuarial numbers, and we look at numbers based on what those totals are and how much those contributions are versus what the underwriters think that the claims are going to be for the next year. And so the contributions, if we keep everything the same, would be that same $3,017,000. Expected costs are still around the same. I think in the page before, it was 3.25. It went down about $50,000. So they're still thinking that, it still could come in at 3.2 million, but your maximum is 3.68. And that's the number that I was wanting you to really pay attention to, along with the $1.8 million of fund reserve. So we have in a fund reserve half of your maximum claims liability, and we're collecting $3 million. So the worst case scenario is that you'd have to draw down a little over $600,000 out of that $1.8 million, which would still leave you at a $1.2 million fund balance, which I think everyone was very comfortable with when we were talking in the committee meeting. Now, we don't want to do that, obviously. We would love for it to continue to build and build and build, but you always have to prepare for the worst and kind of hope for the best sometimes. So the recommended funding rates for the next year is not going to change. And then there's two plan designs that the employees have to choose from. I mentioned a base plan and a buyout plan. So the base plan has a little higher deductible, a little bit lower co-insurance, a little bit higher out-of-pocket maximum. Everything else is pretty close to the same, except for the urgent care. And then the emergency room is a little bit different. But you'll see that the prescription copay, which is very important to people, is the same whether you're on the buyout plan or the base plan. But you have that opportunity to choose as an employee every time at the open enrollment which plan you want to be on. So if you picked the base plan last year and you want to go to the buyout plan this year, that is your choice and you can make that choice. Or if you want to go from the buyout plan down to the base plan, you can. So we want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to pick the plan that they would like to have. So again, no recommended changes. We've made changes in the past couple of years to these plans. And we've also thought about some things. I know there's a new HR manager that's going to be hired, and so we're going to dig in over the next year and look to see if there's any other opportunities, whether it's one plan, another plan, just different things, I think, and other ideas from another perspective from a new HR person with, I'm sure, benefit experience, and we're going to dig into that over the next year. Just make sure that it's the right plan design for the city and the employees. And then on the dental side, again, this is where we changed it last year, where the city is now contributing $30 a month for the employee, which in the past it was completely voluntary and the employees paid for the entire thing. It is ran really well. Right now, it's in a fund surplus between $12,000 and $15,000, so it's making actually money that goes towards that employee benefits fund. You'll see that the overall contributions from the city and the employees is around $164,000, and the projected claims are around $138 this year, and it's right at the same next year. This is something that the city really can't get hurt on because, again, there's not these gigantic claims on dental insurance. I mean, it's just there's $1,000 limits and things like that, so there's really not a big risk. It's completely self-insured. There's not reinsurance attached to this because there's really not a big risk there. But it's ran very well, and again, we're recommending that no changes to the rates again for that particular plan as well. One of the things we did talk about is the plan design. Again, we're going to leave it the same this year, but I think we would like to improve that over time, especially if we can build a fund reserve. I think we would love that max benefit per person to go up. We know that the dental costs are going up. We know orthodontics is a lot more than $1,000. We know it's closer to $5,000 for a total bill. So we would love to get those two numbers higher, but it just has to make sense financially for the city to do that. No waiting periods. This is also something that people can either elect or not elect for their families. We expect most everyone to take it, obviously, if it's free. So in summary, I think you'll love this. There was no rate adjustments to any of the products. So even the employer-paid life insurance, which is $20,000 paid for by the city, did not have any rate increases and no plan changes for this year. And then the voluntary, which is completely paid for by the employees, disability, vision, and extra life insurance, there were no rate increases and no plan design. So again, in summary, we recommend that there's not any rate adjustments or any plan design changes for this upcoming year. We have moved to a different bin admin system this year that I think HR will say they just really love. It's something that our agency provides free of charge to the city. It doesn't cost anything. It's called Employee Navigator. It's a great online enrollment tool. We are going to do a kind of a seminar or kind of, I don't know if it's a lunch and learn, but it's going to be, I think, August 3rd or 4th, Mario. I think we're going to come out and make sure that all the employees, if they want to, can come in and look at how to go online and enroll. I think most of them, since we've been doing this a long time now with an enrollment system, will understand how to do it. But we just want to make sure it's easy for the employees to go on and make changes. And then we're going to do, obviously, education. We're going to have actually what's called our flip book, which is an audio presentation of our employee benefits guide that's attached to the Ben admin system. So all the employee has to do is click, and it goes through the entire benefit guide and explains the products to them. And so even if they miss a meeting or miss something like that, they have that option. So I'll open it up for questions. Anybody on the council? or
Okay,
Mr. Mayor?
I would probably start with public comment. Anybody
Okay.
in the room that would have any questions or comments regarding the plan? Okay, if there's none. Council, Mr. Anderson?
I really don't have any questions. It was a very thorough presentation. I appreciate it for that. It's great that we've been able to carry forward the benefits without any rate increases on anything. It seems like a great plan overall.
I will say, just a quick comment, I think education is critical. Mario and we all talked about this in our last meeting, is we want to make sure that all the employees and their dependents are educated on how to use the plan, and then also what kind of plan it is. That it is a partially self-funded plan, that if we do have a good claims year, then we will have these kind of meetings. And that's very important, that they understand what kind of plan it is.
I don't have any questions.
I have a real quick question.
Sure.
Under these plans, do the employees get to choose their doctors, or they're just certain doctors on the plan? Or
Oh,
how
great
does it
question.
work?
It's through Blue Cross Blue Shield, so it's their PPO network. So it's the broadest network that's available. And so you do not have to go to your primary care physician first to go to a specialist. You can choose anyone in the network. And one of the things we do make sure that when we educate is they stay in the network if they can, because the out-of-network benefits aren't near as good as the in-network benefits. So if they stay in the network, then these benefits apply. But if they go outside, then it's not as good. But you'll be really hard-pressed to find anyone that's not in the network with Blue Cross. And their discounts are second to none. A lot of people ask me, well, why do we stay with Blue Cross? Well, their discounts are fantastic. And if there's anyone here from hospital or a provider, they'll understand that on the other side, that they don't get paid near as much from Blue Cross as they do other providers. It's not so great for the hospitals and doctors, but it's very good for the partially self-insured world.
That's my only
Anything else?
Okay.
Thank you. We sure appreciate your work for the
Absolutely.
city.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that yet.
Do we need a
Have
motion?
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me.
I so moved.
Motion, Ms. Bellinger.
Second.
Second, Mr. Anderson. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, now, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next, under 7, is B, and that is open a public hearing, consider a zone change from R4 multifamily to MD Medical for Lot 12A, City Block 40, located at 813 North Mound Street. This request has been submitted by Robin Miller of Hetty Legg and Associates LLC, case file ZON 2021-05. I want to let you know that this applicant formally withdrew the zone change request on July the 12th of 2021. And so with that, I would submit that we close the public hearing. Sufficient? No vote needed on that, right? Because it's withdrawn. Okay, good deal. We will move to C. Open a public hearing, consider a resolution directing city staff to file an application under Code of Ordinance 118-137C1 to amend the boundaries of a zoning district within the city of Nacogdoches from R4 multifamily to R2 single-family for Lot 12, City Block 41, located at 1102 Logansport Street, which is previously considered by the City Council at the request of R.J. Bohack on August 18, 2020. Councilmember Bellinger has a motion for us.
Well, if you'll read it there, I mean, we're postponing this because there's several principles. I'm sorry. Oh, I do need to, okay. All right. I make the motion to postpone it till another date, which will be picked in the future, to postpone this, so.
Suggest you choose September 7th, which is my understanding of when everybody will be back.
I don't know that I can choose that. That wasn't discussed with me, and we have a, so we'll, uncertain
The
data.
consequences is we have to renotice the hearing.
So can I interject? So,
We have some critical people who are also on vacation, and I didn't know that that was a date, so I was thinking of even August 31st.
well, that's not a regular council meeting. So if, you know, if we're gonna do this, I would suggest that it be on a regular council meeting on the first or third Tuesday of the month. So our first regular council meeting in September would be, is it September the 7th, would be our first?
I believe that's what,
It's the
yes,
7th.
yeah.
For the 21st.
So the choice would be, as understood, would be to schedule a date or to table it, which would require the new
We would just
notice.
have to put out a new notice. And we can do that. There's minimal cost associated with that, but we can do that. I apologize. I thought we had reached out, somebody had reached out to you and said we needed to pick a date.
No,
So-
sorry.
All right, it's okay.
So I think we'll, I'm just
Motion to
going
table.
to postpone this until a date uncertain. Is that correct? Is that how I,
Motion to postpone is till a date in the future.
a date in
Okay.
the future?
Okay.
I'll second that
Have a
motion.
second? Okay. Let's see.
Do you want all in favor?
Have discussion amongst council members or move to?
Discussion? No? No? Anything else? Okay,
Now move to a
Nothing?
vote.
okay. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, that's,
Sorry about that.
no, everything, all good.
You can now close that public hearing.
Oh, sorry. And with that, we will close the public hearing.
That's a lot to remember.
Okay, so next we have D, have a discussion and provide direction regarding the development of an inclusion and diversity program for the city of Nacogdoches, council member Northwest Ward, and city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Let me pull up, I can scroll up and down. Good afternoon or good evening, I guess. And so just wanted to just give some introductory comments and then turn the microphone over to Councilmember Fisher. So, I guess it's been a number of weeks ago, Mayor Mize, Councilmember Fisher, and myself, we met here at City Hall, actually, I think over at the bank, to discuss ways where the city could be, can certainly work on programs to engage residents more effectively and regarding all city services. And so one of the suggestions I made is to, before we go any further, let's do a little research and let's reach out to some folks. And so I suggested that we meet with Dr. Rashard Delaney Fields. She's the Chief Diversity Officer for SFA. She's relatively new in her role, has been in the role for a number of months, but she is the first Chief Diversity Officer for the university. I thought it was important that we do meet with her first, just to get an insight and understand what the university is doing, not only just for the students, but also for the faculty and staff. And so I thought that would be good, and so I reached out to Dr. Delaney Fields to see if we could schedule a time in early July, and so we did that. So back, I believe, on July the 7th, Mayor Mize, Councilmember Fisher, and myself went over to SFA. We met with Dr. Delaney Fields to like I said, to get insight as to what they've been doing up to date, up to this point, and what their future plans are over the coming months into the next school year. And so, based on that discussion, in my conversations with Councilmember Fisher, she requested that we put an item on an upcoming council meeting. And so this is where we are today on July the 20th. Councilmember Fisher provided a brief overview, a summary, in what's in your packet is on the screen, and I can scroll up and down. But with that, I really just wanted to provide some introductory comments and then really turn it over to Ms. Fisher to explain further what her thoughts are and get input from council.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. First, let me say the title, or the way that this has been put in the agenda as the Inclusion and Diversity Program, it might be a little bit of a misnomer. If not a misnomer, it maybe sounds like it's going to be focused either on like hiring processes or performance reviews in sort of an employment, maybe city services context, and that's not what this is about. This is more about a community engagement program. The purpose of establishing something like this is to help improve the quality of life across the board for all Nacogdoches residents and to provide an opportunity for structured community engagement. And let me explain a little bit what I mean by that. Typically speaking, when we look around here in our city council chambers, in open forum, in our public chairs, it is clear that there are many communities that are not represented, and the question is why. I think it's easy to say, well, some people just don't care to show up. I don't think that that's right. I don't think it's that people don't care. It's that some people feel like they don't have a voice. So why bother making the effort to show up to city council, to pick up the phone, if it's not going to be worth your time? I think that what we need to do and what our job is to ask ourselves what it is that we are doing or not doing to make people feel that way, to make people feel that they are disempowered or not valued. And conversely, what can we do to make them feel that it is worth their time and it is worth their effort to be a part of city government? While I know that there have been some attempts in the past by the city at bridging these gulfs, no matter what we've done, we've not been successful. And I think that's because we haven't done it in a structured, really systemic way. I'm sure that most people would agree that we would benefit by something like this. I've spoken to lots of people in this community over the past couple of years from all walks of life, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, employment backgrounds, across the political ideological spectrum. And I have heard resoundingly that this community needs something like this. I'm sure most people here in this community, in the city, would agree that we only benefit by being more inclusive of all communities in Nacogdoches, and that we are only enriched by talking to each other, by learning about our different life experiences, our struggles, and our successes. That the consideration of all voices in the conversation about what's best for our city and how best we can work for everyone is imperative to our success, not just in our policy making or social issues or our economy, but also in creating a shared aspirational vision for where we want to be as a community and how we get there together. That part is especially important, I think, as we embark on our new city comprehensive plan and downtown master plans. This is about being intentional. It's about being proactive, about outreach into traditionally underrepresented communities. It's about inclusivity and creating trust and building relationships. It's about creating a mechanism to address community issues, to figure out who isn't at the table, so that we can bring them into the conversation about what we're doing well and what we need to do better, and tackling those issues together so that they don't become serious problems that affect our overall community well-being. We do this in other areas. We have NEDCO for economic development. We have sessions and brainstorming and planning and meetings for how our economy can grow. The same goes for infrastructure or for planning for I-69, and we should be doing that here too. Because the thing is that all of these issues really, our community health and well-being, a thriving economy, our public schools, inclusivity and respect for diversity, all people having a voice in this city, a plan for the future, all of these things are interconnected and they are dependent on each other. And if one is suffering, they all are, and then we're not doing our job right. The last thing that I will say about this is that the key, really the hallmark of this proposal is hiring a staff person. This program or committee or whatever it is that we come up with will not be successful without that. If we want to be proactive, if we want to make sure that we aren't creating a program or a committee just to say that we did it and move on, We'll need a dedicated full-time staff person to provide support and oversight, to proactively assist in addressing issues, to create an assertive outreach and trust-building program in this community, and to concentrate on long overlooked issues and placing them in a position of prominence. This committed approach to hiring a staff person is the crux. It is what will help shield against a program that falls victim to inaction. I know our town has the heart for this. We just haven't had the mechanism in place to do it, at least not in a structured, intentional, long-term committed way. And that's what this is about. So for my ask, I ask that City Council consider through this fiscal year 2021-2022 budget process the creation of a community engagement program. This could include the hiring of a staff member and allocating resources to provide recommendations on how to move our community forward in this respect. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I will be quiet and I will allow for public comment and discussion.
Okay, it's time for public comment. Do we have anyone who wants to speak in favor? Okay. You'll state your name, please. We know you, but if you'll do that for us, we'd appreciate it.
I'm Kyle Childress, longtime pastor of Austin Heights Baptist Church here in town. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Commission, for allowing me to be here. I am strongly supportive of this, and I commend the city for this conversation. This is terrific. There are all kinds of efforts going on from the university, churches, civic organizations, and private individuals in the city on trying to build connections and learn to hear one another and give people a voice. This action helps put the city at the forefront and sort of galvanizes everyone else. You provide leadership, and we're working as partners on this. I mean, my heavens, we're citizens here, we're all wanting to work together, but your leadership really sets the pace, and so this is important to all of us. After the end of World War II, Christian historians, and then they got in dialogue with Jewish historians and Islamic historians and other historians, tried to evaluate what went wrong in the 20s, 30s, led to the war, all of those kinds of things. And one Christian historian, Martin Marty, he turned the phrase that there are two kinds of religion, two kinds of communities, not liberal, conservative, not Orthodox, Catholic, or whatever, but there's mean and non-mean communities. This is an action that I think can say, Nacogdoches, let's be at least a non-mean community. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm G.W. Neal. Thank you for the opportunity, and we appreciate all that you all do for our community here. Just a comment that say that I was here several months ago in the same position, and it was talked about at that time. And I'm strongly in favor of maybe looking at an opportunity for our community. We live in a great community, great diversity. What an opportunity for us to come together and work together, share and grow together in this community. You know, I reflect on the inclusive. You know, we have a great community, and we just need to be inclusive as we build this together. Not wait till the last minute and just pull a small group together, but let's take the big picture and look at the vision, what we want our community to look like, where we want to be 10 years from now. And so being inclusive, bringing it all and working together to make the best for our community. So I'm excited. Thank you, Council. Now I'm hoping that you continue to move forward in this direction.
Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Hello, my name is Lauren Ivy Sija, and I too am speaking in support of this. As a social worker who has worked in many community agencies, including schools, mental health agencies, community literacy agencies, I appreciate the city taking strategic steps to find ways to engage different residents in our community, specifically those who are traditionally underheard and underserved. So again, I appreciate it. I think that this is a great initiative, and I also appreciate the strategic effort that you have made to ensure that this is not not only, not just something that is done and over with, but will be a lasting program in our community.
Hello.
Good evening. My name is Wilma Cordova, and I teach social work at SFA. And I want to say, I admire your risk, your tenacity. My hat's off to you. It's about time that someone took this risk. And I just can't even express enough passion about the need for this community to begin to embrace people. I've lived here 21 years, and I've been on the grassroots efforts to get people to vote. I don't care how they vote. Again, they have the right, and even those who don't have the right to live in a community that is safe for them as well, and to prosper, to have the opportunities that others have. And I'm not speaking from a social work perspective, because social welfare is social welfare. I also volunteer time at a food pantry. That's the epitome of social welfare. And there are so many needs. That pantry is located on the poorest tract in East Texas. We're #1. Isn't that fantastic? In poverty as well. We must embrace this concept. It's not going to hurt anyone. We live in Texas. Texas is 1/3 Hispanic and others, okay? SFA is becoming a Hispanic Serving Institute. We should have representation from those students in elected seats. They're like 1/3 of the population in Nacogdoches. We've got to embrace our young people as well. We've got to open our arms for them. There's businesses that are run by not only the mainstream Americans, but also on Main Street. Antonia Garcia, for example, owns a beauty shop on Main Street. She needs to be embraced by this community and this committee as well. And I reach out to her, and I think that at times we have to reach out to people. We have to meet them where they are and go to their communities. We have to be there, support them, be visible. And so, again, my hat's off for taking that risk. You're going to go places, and you need to run for other offices as well. And that's my spiel. Thank you.
Maybe mayor, huh? Anybody else?
Okay, my name is Ann Keenan, and I am a retired teacher. I've been a member of this community for 40 years at least. Been a parent, a Girl Scout leader, and I can't tell you how many times we've had this conversation about what we needed and getting people involved and having our community come together. I've been part of organizations, we've had programs, events, days, and nothing seems to really ever deeply change. So I just want to support, this is a big ask, but I think it's the only way we're going to not keep spinning our wheels and saying what we want, but not ever having it really happen. So I definitely support this, and I think taking the step of putting a person in there and having it really happen is gonna make all the difference in the world of us finally getting to stop having meetings and talking about things and really seeing something happen. So thank you, and thank you guys for considering this.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Sean Hightower. I live in Ms. Fisher's ward, but I actually think I live equal distance from all of you. I wanted to come. I've spoken to Ms. Fisher about this issue, I guess, for the last year or two since she's been on the board. You know, one thing that I really want to drive home is the practical nature of this. We're asking for money for one staff member. The reason SFA has a chief diversity officer is because they have the value. They see the value in that. They see the value that it actually intrinsically brings back to the city. One, practically, you will see in all the cities that have diversity programs, diversity officers, lawsuits go down. The amount of money that you pay back in lawsuits also goes down. So lawyers like myself, it won't discourage us from filing lawsuits, but the amount of money that you have to pay in the back end do tend to be lower. City of Houston, City of Dallas, some of the smaller cities. So you do see where you're paying less in your liability. Second, from a hospital perspective, I'm on the hospital board. We run, you know, we have many of the same problems that y'all probably do, and these huge data dumps. Every year, the city council pays thousands of dollars for racial profiling data, which is required for the FBI profiling data. That data, if you go back for 10 years, has never changed and has actually gotten progressively worse for people of color. Now, the reason behind that, who knows? But that data does not change. And that is dumped on y'all at one city council meeting probably once a year and then never spoken about again. Same with the hospital. Our hospital did a cleanliness study. Our hospital was dirty. We had nobody in the cleaning department that realized how much our patient scores were saying how dirty we are. So we weren't getting that information to the right people. The hospital has now hired somebody who basically takes that data dump information that we do get and disseminates it to the right department. We've actually hired social workers, medical social workers to find programs for people, and it all comes from that department. So I do want to encourage y'all, just from a cost saving perspective, I actually think the cost of hiring the officer, you'll see the benefit of that on the back end, where you're going to save money, and you're going to get the data, and the value of the data, it's not just going to be dumped on you and it means nothing. You can actually do something with that data to change. And SFA is doing a program right now that I talked to Amelia about with Dr. Cooper. He's got all this fantastic data from all of these various town hall meetings that he's done. For what? You know, he's just going to dump that on us. So if we had somebody that could then take that data and implement the data, we have now made that grant program at SFA valuable to this community, because that is completely funded by a grant. So let's use that data to make it valuable.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Go ahead. No, after you.
Mr. Mayor, City Councilmen and women, I do appreciate an opportunity to come and speak with you, and just wanted to encourage us to move forward with Commissioner Fisher's recommendation. I do think it's the right thing for us to do. I've lived here most of my life. I've been a banker here for 40 years. I've been involved on NISD bond committee, where we saw a very diverse group come together and be able to work together. That didn't just happen. That was reach out that brought that together, and it made it stronger because of it. I see the community planning meeting that we recently had. Not as diverse as we would have liked it, but it did have some diversity, and I do think that was really good as well. And if you look at our recent Hispanic outreach by NEDCO, that has been a very, very good thing, and it has good action. I would just be remiss if I didn't say that if you look especially on the south side of our community, we are seeing a significant growing Hispanic community, and we should do everything in our power, you know, to embrace that and to progress it. If we don't, we're really missing the boat. You know, we have other sectors as well, African American, Indian, Asian, whatever the case might be. It's important, you know, for us to reach out. It takes more than just putting up a sign and say, come. We have to go out and gather people and encourage it and have them come and make comments and be active and make, you know, be a part of the plan. It's important for our community that we do that. So I just wanted to say that I'm very supportive of this. I think it is the right thing. I want to see our community grow and develop, and I don't think that this is much of an investment to make to try to be better at that. I think an officer of some sort that would be able to reach out and guide it and nurture it and work it, you know, is very important to get the participation that we really want to see in something of this nature. So I appreciate the opportunity to come. Wanted to share that opinion tonight, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mayor and Council, Jim Seavey. I am a resident of this community and also happen to be Chief of Police. So, there is nothing but benefit to be gained from inclusiveness. It benefits individuals, it benefits the police department, it benefits the city of Nacogdoches. We have things to overcome. We have history to overcome. We have a lot of people who like to talk about the past. Well, we need to focus on the future. I believe that we need to focus on people of quality. We need to pay less attention to gender and skin color and more attention to people of character who want to move the ball forward. And I think that we've got many projects developing in the police department right now that will fit with this nicely. I think that we want to be a part of this, and I can tell you that whatever decision you come to, that we're going to participate, and we're going to participate in a real and a positive way, and that we want to be a part of this, and let's see where it goes. Ready to help, happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
I'm Ed Poole. Thank you for letting me speak today. Mayor Mize, council members. Just a few observations as I listen to everyone speak. I'm sad to say that I have served on various committees over the years trying to do this very thing, and we start off extremely excited that we will be able to draw in different members of the community for a voice, and each time we failed. And I realized that the reason that we failed is because of a ministry that I serve in called Glory Gang on Sunday night. And it's a cross-section of grade school age children that we minister to. It takes an average of 3 years for us to gain the trust of those household members as we try to minister to those children. And I realized in listening to you today that it's very similar to what the proposal is before us, is that we create something within the city government that allows for day in, day out work to create that trust level. Because I know there's a big cross-section of people within our community that feel like they have no voice or no way to speak, and they need to have that. And to have city government step up and do that type thing, to work day in and day out, to gain that trust, I think you'll eventually see that we'll have fruit of our success. So I commend you for that. I encourage you to continue and create a voice for all of our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else speak for? Okay, anybody speak against? Sure.
Hi, is this going to be decided today? Will you guys be deciding yay or nay on this issue today?
We are going to instruct, probably set a committee to study it and to work on it.
And then to decide. It won't be decided tonight.
The hiring would be, I think, something that comes back to the council.
Okay. Because
Please
this
state
is what happens.
Please state your name.
Tracy Lassiter.
Okay.
This is what happens when I don't look at the city council meeting, because I didn't know that, I didn't even know I'd be here today, much less speaking. But I question the use of something like this. The reason I ask whether it's going to be voted on tonight, because I haven't even had a chance to gather my thoughts, but I can tell you right now that it concerns me that we would create what is going to be a bureaucracy. That, you know, you'll start with one person, a diversity leader, and before long you will have other people coming in under that, because it's now a whole new bureaucracy that's going to develop within the city government to handle this issue, which frankly I question whether it's even an issue at all. So I hope that nothing permanent is going to be decided tonight. I hope that we will have other opportunities in the future in which to discuss this, in which I could be more prepared.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, council, Ms. Bellinger, any thoughts? I'm sorry, is there anyone else to speak against? Okay, so we'll close the public comment.
Come back to me.
Okay, certainly. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you for the presentation. This is something I think that has been on all of our minds. As Mr. Poole and others mentioned, there have been attempts at this in the past, but I think the element that has been missing is having a full-time person as a coordinator, as a specific liaison between various communities in the city. It is not, it's not something that I think needs to become an oversized department or bureaucracy to be effective, I think starting with somebody who can proactively go out into the community, and you know, several people mentioned try to draw people in, go meet people where they are, and do so in conjunction with the committee that we've talked about. And so, you know, in general, I'm certainly in favor of exploring how this might look and how we might make it happen.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher, anything else?
I talked enough.
Okay.
You tired of hearing from me?
Ms. Bellinger.
So, I do want to encourage us to, as we go forward with this, to make sure that we do it with an evidence-based, I know, Dr. Fields, you're nodding at me here, but in an evidence-based manner, because I personally have seen programs that have been successful, and I've seen programs that actually have achieved opposite outcomes than what they set out to do. And so I encourage having a program and a person focused on engagement, on listening, on rather than mandatory kinds of activities. And so having said that, I am very supportive of increasing our engagement with all communities and inclusion of all people. And we're not just talking about one or two. I mean, we've mentioned just a few communities, but there's several communities that we need to be thinking about engagement. I really do like to listen. I think listening is a huge part, and we need a person who will be listening.
Great, thank you.
2 cents.
Ed Poole mentioned something a minute ago, and I'm thinking back on the same time. Roger Van Horn, probably 10 to 12, maybe 15 years ago, engaged a group of us, and we sat upstairs in his office and talked about how we could engage the community, how we could get people from all different parts of the community to come together and to create a vision for what we want for Nacogdoches and for what needs there are out there. And we tried it once, and we were unable to get the group together. And so about a year later, I think at the council's urgence, Roger came back to us again. We got together, and we made another effort, and again, we failed. And I agree with what Ms. Bellinger said. I think it's just having someone in place that's consistently working on this every day. I think that's what you've got to have in order to be able to encourage people to participate and be included, to find the leaders in the different groups around the community that will be part of these committees and accomplish the work. So I'm certainly in favor of moving forward. And Mario, if you would, could you kind of give us some ideas on how you think we may do that?
Well,
don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh, no worries. Well, you know, as you know, we're in the budget cycle, so you know, it's not like we're needing decisions today. We're not approving any budgets today. Really, what we're trying to do is, if this is a program that the council believes that we should move forward, then we obviously need to start modeling that from a financial perspective, as far as setting resources aside to fund the program. The second thing I would say, and whether we do it now or we're doing it sometime later, and I don't have a specific date in mind at this point, it would be nice to get some feedback and direction from City Council on, you know, what the qualifications, what a job profile, what kind of a job description, at least a temporary work plan, so that whatever it is that we're going to be recruiting for, that we can articulate, because it's a new program, right? And so when you articulate this to a potential employee, if that's where we're going, we need to make sure that there is good input to be given to that individual, so that we know we're going through the right process as far as the selecting of an individual. My suggestion would be because it is fairly fluid, and to move pretty quickly, and to get that feedback, you know, as your city manager, I would request that, you know, a couple of council members be set aside to work with me, and again, I'm sort of telling Dr. Delaney Fields, but because we do have already a model in place, literally just down the street, it would be good maybe to work with her if she has the time to work with me and a couple of members of council, so that we can at least start putting some proposals together and recommendation and bring it back to the full council for you all to ultimately review and decide and set the stage for our future.
Okay. And I have had some discussions with Mr. Bolden, and he certainly wants to be a part of that committee. And certainly I would think Ms. Fisher, or at least that would be my recommendation, that she and Mr. Bolden assist you with that if the council is not objective to that.
That helps.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I would, any other direction from us? And again, I think we just need to assume you have our consensus to work towards developing a policy and kind of figuring a job description of who you want, and then you'd come back to the council.
Yes, sir.
To move
We'll
forward.
definitely come back to you, and again, because we are in the budget cycle, we're gonna need to put some numbers together, obviously, so that is considered as part of, again, the budget process. Okay?
Okay. Anything else, council?
No, thank you.
Okay. Next would be number 8, executive session, and I don't believe we have anything there. Certainly wouldn't need to open because we don't have it, so I'd have, accept a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry.
No, not yet.
Forgot. Oh. So we would move back to the budget discussion. Sorry about that.
Hey, Pam, will you give the audience just a couple of minutes to clear out if they want to?
You also have this printed out as well in front of you because it's very difficult to see on the screen. What this is our first draft budget by law is due the end of this month, okay? And so this is very preliminary. I'm not to the point I'm ready to publish the budget, but this is very preliminarily looking at general fund. This is existing programs, existing staff, existing service levels of operations. If you will notice, we are looking at almost $27 million in revenue. And I'll scan down for everybody in the audience. Same amount of expenditure. So this is a balanced budget. This includes, like I said, every existing program and employee and service level that we are currently providing. What we're going to go over in a few minutes is all of the new additional programs, new programs and program enhancements, new staffing, those types of things that would be in addition to what is currently in the budget and covered by our existing revenues. This is just by department. This is not detail. When y'all get your first look at the draft budget, you will see detail by department. This is just going to be a very high level by revenue category and by department. And so the only thing that I would like to draw your attention to here on the property tax amount, this is at the existing level of property taxes for the current year, with the exception of I have received an estimate from the appraisal district on new construction. And so we have calculated what the value of new construction would be, because that is new money. It does not affect the property tax rate. And so that is a little less than $100,000 of new money that is already plugged in here. So sales tax, franchise fees, these are all our best guess estimates at what we hope to see next year. We are planning a recovery. We are not back to prior to COVID-19 levels in our fines and fees, recreation fees, but we are working our way to that. And so this budget kind of is a bridge to back to normalcy, we hope. And so if you have any questions about those specific things, we can cover that as best as I can tonight. I just want you to understand, as the city exists today, we have a somewhat draft budget that is balanced. So what we're going to talk about now are things that we want to maybe possibly add to this as on the expenditure side, which of course would create the need for additional revenues. I'm gonna go ahead and jump.
Can I ask a question
Yes,
real
yes.
quick?
Mhm.
The interfund transfers, which one is, I mean, well, no, okay, so I guess it's both of them. The franchise fee transfers, you just broke them up into two
I broke
different
them
ones?
into two this time to give you a little more detail.
Okay, and there was some talk, when was the last time? Last year, about starting to look into how we can lower that amount and
And that's
strategies
going to
for
be an
that.
option that we're gonna cover in just a few seconds.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I will
yeah.
stop
No,
asking
no,
the
you're
questions.
good. That's exactly what I want you to do. Okay, so we're gonna jump back to the prior piece of paper that we were talking, we went through the fire services, so I'm gonna jump down. This is a listing, and general fund is gonna be your first 2 pages, and then we'll jump over to utility and sanitation fund. But let's talk general fund right now. So, during the budget process, and I know you've heard from all our departments by now, and so there were quite a few things that they have brought to y'all as new programs or program enhancements. One of those being code enforcement. We have currently 1 code enforcement officer that works the entire city. And so in order for us to expand that function, we need to add some employees to that. One code enforcement officer, yes.
Before we get into the details here, I've got some broader questions.
Okay.
One is, so I assume that with the revenue, if we don't add anything else, that we're staying within our budget. Is that correct?
Right, and that was that first screen. That is
Just wanted to make sure,
the
because
existing budget, yes.
And anything above that we consider will have to be paid for by
Additional
new
revenues,
taxes
right.
or a bond or something else. Okay, so my other question is, there were several items that we had on suggested capital improvements. And I think some may have gotten into these presentations, but there were other items that were not included in the presentation, capital improvements over the next 2 years that we're going to be required to make. Is that correct?
So like on the CIP, the 5-year CIP, is that what you're speaking of, the bigger projects?
Yes, the bigger projects, including sewers and, all
Right.
these other, and they're not included in this.
Not in this, no.
Either, or in the other asks, so,
And the reason is what you're looking at is the operating budget.
right. But, so anything, so, I know it's the operating budget.
Okay.
But, so the capital improvements on top of that will be an additional, that we'll have to have taxes raised for those or not?
Well, your taxes cover your operating expenditures. So you have operating revenues, which are taxes, fines, and fees. And then you have what we can purchase with reserves, which is capital equipment, if we have the funding to fund CIP with reserves, or most of those big projects you have to finance. And so in the past, that's what we've issued bonds to build the new wastewater plant or whatever those projects are. So there are some very big projects that no, they will not be covered under operational revenues. They will have to be funded under a different source, whether that be reserves or whether we do a bond issuance.
Well, and I think the other thing, Councilmember, is if you look at your tax rate, to look at the city's tax rate, there's 2 components of the tax rate. There's the operation and maintenance, and O&M for short, and interest and sinking, which is your debt service. So your tax rate is divided up into 2 components. And so what you're really looking at, as far as the presentations that you heard today and that you heard last week, really are the O&M side.
And part of my question has to do with how we cover water expenses and sewage and all that. Sorry, Mr. Bartlett. But back to
Right.
wondering if the water bill actually covers all those expenses, and if not, how do we in the future make sure that those
Yeah.
expenses
Well,
are being covered? And
what you
'cause those are
have,
huge, too.
right? Absolutely, and those are separate of what you're looking at here, because those are basically your utility rates. Those are what covers your your staffing, some repairs and maintenance to to the system. The purchase of equipment also covers that. But if you're looking at that 10-year CIP document that I shared with council a number of weeks ago, and the multiples of millions, again, some theoretically, some of the smaller expenditures may be covered under operating funds, but some of them will be required, a bond program, and may require just rates adjusted to cover those expenditures to make those major repairs, replacements of the water system. And it's because we haven't done that. It has not happened in years. And so we are woefully behind on our infrastructure. And so it's going to have to be some discussions with this council on how we prioritize the next 10 years and do these in manageable, quite honestly, manageable tranches. Because I would not recommend, we're not going to bond our way out of multiples and multiples and multiples of millions of dollars in these projects. And we don't have the human capacity to do it. I think the cost of inflation and the amount of time it takes to design and construct are far going to outweigh the cost of what we're projecting years earlier to do it. So my recommendation, again, it's not part of this presentation, but my recommendation is to come to this council after the budget process is completed and have a conversation. How do you want to tackle quite honestly, the lack of maintenance and, the lack of infrastructure improvements that we made in this community for years? And it's just going to take a lot of conversation. It's more than just a council meeting. It's going to require a several-hour conversation because it's not an easy conversation to have. And whatever we do is going to require bonds to be issued, whether they're revenue bonds or general obligation bonds or whatever way, but it's going to require, quite a bit of money issued to help facilitate the construction of these projects.
But we are on the back end of a set of bonds that will supply us some money to do those capital improvements.
On the general fund side, yes, sir.
Huh?
Just the
No,
one?
not just the fire truck. There's more than,
No.
not just the communication system. There's more than that.
Right.
No, but I'm talking about the bond that we currently have. Is it one or how many bonds?
We actually have so we have bonds on the water, the revenue side. So kind of at this point, we have to separate the utility, those funds, they don't run on tax money, they run on rates. And so they have to run like they're their own business, okay? So the utility fund is all funded by the rate structure we set. The general fund is what is funded by the taxes. And so we do have a component of the debt service rate of the property tax right now there's a couple of bonds that are still outstanding. They both will pay off September of '22. And so we had our financial advisor look, and we got 20.
Now, is one of those the communication system?
One of them is the communication
Okay.
system. The other is a refunding of a prior year.
It was a
It's
bigger
a big
amount.
refunding.
Yeah.
And so what we have, the financial advisors has gone and looked at what we can do, and we can issue up to $22 to $23 million and stay within that same debt service property tax rate that we currently have. And so that's what I think you were alluding to is there's two components of it. It's not just the $1.5 million that's coming off. We have another refunding that will be coming off in September of 2020 as well. That is on general fund side, so that's streets and fires and in parks and that type of thing. The water, sewer, sanitation, all that stuff, that's a whole different. Those are usually done with revenue bonds, but they have to be done with rates, not with property taxes.
We've got about 25 million on that side, right? 20.
Oh, no, it's a
22.
little more than that right now.
Is it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and then the other question I have is we just saw if we're going item by item, we just saw, the last part today. So I would really like to have just a little bit of time to compare instead of us saying, oh, yeah, that's a good one and that's not.
I don't think she's asking us, but
We're-
she's just
you
going
don't
to
have
show
to
us
have an
what it
answer.
costs.
I need to get some feedback on direction, because at this point, our budget that will be issued next week is existing programs, existing employees, okay? So before, we have time to make changes to that budget. Y'all will see the first detailed budget, the first meeting in August, And you still at that point can make changes to this budget up until the time that we adopt it. And so you're going to see iterations of this budget over the next few council meetings. What we're asking tonight is, these are all new things that have been requested operationally that are not built into the current budget. And we just need to get a feel if you want us to pursue initiating some of these things into that budget, understanding that we have to draw revenues to balance it. And so those are the things that we're going, and we're gonna give you kind of some ideas. Mario and I went through and kind of tiered them, basically what we really think we might need to fund in 21-22, the ones that we could push to the next year, and the ones that we could look at even in future years. At the end of the day, though, that's just our best guess at what we, where it should fall. We don't have the money to fund all of the new programs in 1 year. We could not do this if we wanted to. We can't raise enough revenue to do that. And so this is just an indication, kind of like the new diversity and inclusion, that is one of those options. We need the feedback. Do y'all want us to include that in the upcoming proposed budgets?
And
Same
thank
things.
you also for doing the tiers. I really appreciate that. I know I was asking for quite a bit of information on that. I really appreciate that. And can I say one more thing? I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
If we could please post these things, including the PowerPoints that were done through the departments. I didn't see them posted as part of the agenda, or they should be public, I think, so people can be viewing them and see what we're looking at.
Well, we will for sure do that once we get to the first draft budget. And that is by next Friday, the first draft budget in detail, it will be posted. That's by law, we have to do that.
But we can definitely post
Yes.
the presentations that have been made for last week's council meeting and this one. They'll be in the minutes.
Oh, even the PowerPoints or oh, great, thank you. And then yeah, that'd be helpful. Appreciate it. So, I'm out of questions
No,
right
you're good. Okay. So, with that being said, the first program enhancement that we have proposed, possibly being a tier 1, which would be a need for 21-22 budget year, is the code enforcement enhancement. That would include reclassifying our existing code enforcement officer to a superintendent level, hiring 2 part-time code enforcement officers, and a full-time code enforcement officer. But if you'll notice on here, that is at a 0 amount with the little asterisk that says funded in sanitation. What we're hoping to do is to hire a code enforcement officer in the sanitation fund to work on illegal dumping. The majority of their practice will be in that area, but will still be available to work other code enforcement issues as well. We will need vehicles for these code enforcement officers because it is a position that requires them to be out in the field. 1 vehicle that will be shared by the 2 part-time officers would be funded through general fund, and then 1 through the sanitation fund. We feel like for a recurring cost of about $31,000 a year, this is salary and benefits. That is definitely something that we would like for y'all to consider. Secondarily to that, we have the customer service program enhancement, and this is basically some shared office assistants through the engineering and the planning and zoning department. They currently do not have clerical staff in either of those departments, and so the human resources as well. I think the human resources position eventually may be a shared position with the city secretary's office if to accomplish the goal of having a central point of contact for City Hall and to answer all those incoming calls. Part-time office assistant at Parks and Rec. I think that Brian alluded to the fact that there's no one at the cemetery office. We would like to post certain hours that we would have someone there, and a part-time position can accomplish that. So those all we have categorized those as tier 1 as well. Total cost on that, all benefits included, is a little over $101,000. Another item that we had brought to us this year was the Historic Sites Program enhancement. There were 4 positions that were requested, one being the Zion Hill full-time museum assistant, a curator of collections, and 2 part-time museum assistants. We feel like with Zion Hill coming on board soon, that is very important for us to get a full-time person there. We're hoping that expands in and we'll need someone there to coordinate with wedding planners and caterers and all of that we hope comes with the Zion Hill project. Right now, we do not have staffing to staff all of our museums in that department, and so this would assist us with having at least a body at the Zion Hill Museum.
That won't be needed until the fall of next year, right?
I think, was it just summerish? Summer,
Summer
right,
next year,
right.
okay.
So now this, what I'm giving you is a full year cost, because ongoing, that's what it will be.
Right,
We would not fill this until a little bit prior to opening. We'll have to do some pre-work, but somewhere around the summer of next year. So for this year, there would not be a full year's cost, but that is an ongoing recurring cost, and so you will see the full amount there. That one we have listed as a tier 1 and a tier 2, which means we would like to review this again for the next budget cycle, would be the other positions that were requested. Another thing that I believe last year during the budget cycle that council had requested was for us to look at increasing the minimum wage. Last year, during part of the compensation plan, we set a minimum wage for the city of $12.70 an hour. We had people at $7.25, we had people at $8.22, we had people at $9. We did accomplish that. I think it has helped on recruitment of some of those laborer type positions. I think the request from council last year was to look at, the magic $15 an hour number. That honestly, I ran through the numbers for this year, going straight from $12.70 to $15, and the numbers were very, very large, and it creates a compression issue because we're going to have laborers and equipment operators all making the same thing, and they have very distinct levels of job function. And so it will creep up the pay grade scale a little bit, and that's going to take a little more detail to get how much that's going to be. Just getting everyone to 15 was about $150,000 in the general fund, and that does not address the compression issues. But if we phase that in over time, we can take the bottom pay grade, which is at $12.70, and move everybody up one pay grade to $13.33.37 an hour, and we can accomplish that with general fund about $37,000 annually. You'll see in utility and sanitation in a minute, it's much, much smaller than that. And so we feel like if that is something that the council wants us to work towards a higher minimum wage, that phasing it in over a 3 to 4 year approach, this would be a good point to start that for relatively a small amount of money investment. So general fund has 2 pages, so we're going to keep going. Street department, a couple of years ago, we moved a crew in the street department over to a second brush truck. So that eliminated the ability for of the streets to do a lot of the paving and the striping, or I'm not sure, it's not striping, that they were doing in-house, because they lost basically a whole crew to the second brush truck. And so they have been working with pulling people from the landfill when they have days that they need to do paving. And so what their request is to try to build those positions back into the general fund street department budget. They have requested a operator 1, an operator 2, and 2 laborers. After speaking with Steve Bartlett and Carrie, we have determined that we could possibly phase this in over a 2-year period. If we did that, then they could work with an operator 1 and a laborer in the current year, and an operator 2 and a laborer in future years. That would be something that we would review during the budget process next year if you decide to go that route. Another item would be a street sweeper. We have 1 street sweeper. This would be an enhancement to create a second street sweeper. So there would be the capital cost, which would be a one-time purchase out of reserves, but an annual recurring cost of about $44,000. That is salary and benefits total. We have pushed that to a tier 2. Just on our end, we feel like that's something that we could really definitely look at next year. But like I said, this is all open to your discretion. If you want to change that tier level, you definitely have the ability to do so. And reducing interfund transfers. So Ms. Fisher, this is kind of this has come up the last couple of years. We know that we have some interfund transfer amounts that probably are a little higher than most cities have. There is a reason for that. We have less sales tax than most cities have, but over time, we have become very dependent on those interfund transfers, and they have grown over time because the operational transfers are tied to the budgets in the general fund. And so as they increase with the compensation plan, so increases the transfer because it's a percentage. Also on the franchise fee, we do an 8% franchise fee. So the utility system pays general fund a franchise fee, just like the cable system and the gas system. We pay ourselves a franchise fee, but we pay it at 8%. In a perfect world, I would love to see that at 7%. In order to do that, though, that's a $249,000 reduction in transfers in the general fund. Well, that's existing expenditures out there that are not going to be covered by that $250,000. And so revenues have to be generated to cover that, ongoing revenues. And so that is definitely something that we want to work towards. It is a very significant amount, and I feel like it's going to have to be tiered in over time. So we have put the franchise fee reduction as a tier 2 to be looked at for next budget cycle, and then the reducing the operational category percentages. This is going to take probably, and I say 5 years, but it could take longer. In a perfect world, I would like to see about $1 million reduction in those interfund transfers. That's definitely not doable in 1 or 2 years. So that is something that I would like to come back over time. We're wanting to do a little bit more in-depth study on how we set those percentages. We've really, for lack of a better explanation, found a hard time finding anybody that will do that. We've talked to our auditors. They can't do it because, of course, they have to audit us. And so we're still looking at the possibility of finding someone that can actually do that analysis for us. But I don't think we're at that point today that I would like to suggest that we know what we need to be at. I think we need to find out where that transfer number should be and then start working towards it. So for that reason, we have put that as a tier 3. Then you'll notice on this is some capital. This is actually going to be on the reserve side, so this is not tied to ongoing operating revenues. This is just going to be some options for y'all to utilize existing reserves to make some new purchases. So what you'll see in the budget that y'all are presented on the first August meeting, there are going to be replacement, and what you've seen in prior presentations, there'll be some replacement items. So we have vehicles that, as they meet the end of life, we'll replace a administrative fire truck, or we'll replace the parks mowers or whatever. Those things will be in your detailed budget that you will see. These are just new items that we are significantly cost items that we wanted y'all to have some input as to, do you want to use those reserve funds to do that? And so quickly I'll go through animal services. They had mentioned that they had the need for the generator. They do not have a generator currently at the animal service facility, and the floor resurfacing. Both of those we have tagged as tier 1. Parks and Cemetery, the mausoleum roof, around $60,000 is our estimate. The dump truck at the Parks and Cemetery Department, as Brian said, the dump truck they have existing was in 1997. It was a hand-me-down from another department. Ms. Bellinger, you were asking about the equipment replacement program. When a department is budgeted for a piece of equipment, it can be set up on that program. The problem with this particular piece of equipment, it was never budgeted for the parks to have a dump truck. It was, water utilities got a new dump truck, and they're, we have an old one, would you like it? Well, it grows the fleet. That was never included in a replacement schedule at all to begin with. And so, because it was kind of a hand-me-down. And so they've never actually been budgeted for their own dump truck in the Parks and Cemetery Department. And they also have asked for a tractor with a grapple. I think they had some issues with picking up trees and limbs this year. They are doing that with a front-end loader, I believe you said. Okay, not that, wrong piece of equipment. But we have discussed that is a possibility to be moved to the next budget year, if you so choose. We mentioned earlier, the finance and the human resources are looking at some software enhancements to work time and attendance scheduling, employee evaluations. So those are there in two pieces. That Public Works, we have a shower and eye wash station request, a kitchen and warming station request. Those both have been tagged as Tier 1. The water and the shower and eye wash station, I believe, is an OSHA issue, is what Mr. Bartlett had told us earlier today. And the kitchen and warming station, I think they found when we were going through our latest emergency situation, is that we had employees that were having to basically live at the Public Works facility, and they did not have when they didn't have showers, and then they didn't have ways to warm. And this is not a full kitchen. This is just ways for them to warm foods and stay somewhat, out of the cold, I guess, when different disasters come through. Tier 2 items for Public Works would be a forklift. Another thing that they ran into during the storm was the ability to move large pieces of mostly water and those types of things, commodities that were coming in. We have pushed that to a Tier 2, hoping that if we have a forewarning of a new storm, that we can rent a forklift, and if we use it, great, and if we don't have to, that's even better. So we have pushed that to the next year if that is agreeable. And then a bucket truck. Years ago, the city had a bucket truck. It was utilized during, with the building maintenance department at that time. We have not had a bucket truck in years. I believe that one was rather old when it finally died. We have multiple departments that have the need for a bucket truck. One thing that comes to mind is the overhead street banners that we have on University and North Street. We don't have anyone on staff that can go and change those out, and sometimes you'll drive through and the program that it's advertising was 4 months ago. We have to work with outside contractors to come in and do that. And so this would allow us to go back to the days when we had our own bucket truck, and police department can use this to set cameras, and so this is one of those big asks that hasn't been in the budget in quite a few years. We have not had a bucket truck, and so therefore that's why we wanted to put this out there for y'all and for your consideration. We also have a couple of, it looks like 4 more positions that have been requested. We have put these all at Tier 2. I think we need a little more time to evaluate some of these. Police department has requested a new lieutenant, and I think the chief went over the reasoning for that is because there's only one lieutenant on day shift, and so this would be the second one. A quartermaster, and then in the animal shelter, an adoption and rescue coordinator, and in the parks department, a horticulturalist. And so those are recurring costs. Those we have tagged to review again next year. But at this point, I would like to bring your attention to the blue items, which are the Tier 1, what we have set as Tier 1. And if we were to fund all of the blue items this year, it would create a need for $297,000 worth of additional revenue. Now, just as a side note, what revenue can we create with a property tax increase? Right now, with existing revenues, we will not get new property tax values from the appraisal district until next Monday. But with the existing value, 1 penny creates about $179,000. And so you'll see that it will take probably about $0.015 to fund all of these Tier 1s. So just as you're going through, those would be the things that keep in mind. The orange is the one-time reserves. Tier 1 reserves that we've requested is $439,000. That does not affect taxes. It affects your bottom line of your reserves. Our estimates right now, and we have not updated this for the new budget, but as of, I think, maybe 6 weeks ago, we were sitting on 50% reserves And by law, by charter, we have to keep 25%. And so we're sitting on a couple of extra $1 million that we could definitely utilize for some of these one-time purchases if you so choose. So this will be an additional $439,000 worth of Tier 1 request for capital that we would like you to review as well.
But if I'm getting ahead of you, just tell me to
No,
stop.
that's fine.
What about the COVID money?
COVID money is part of your reserve, so that part of that 50%
It's already in there?
Now, the original
$6.5
CARES money.
million,
No.
the new money.
Okay, no, not the new money. New money is not here at all. We actually are gonna get a little over $8 million. We have not gotten the full set down of what we're going to do with that. That's gonna be a whole separate part. We're not gonna build that into this budget because at this point, we've just now filed with Texas Division of Emergency Management to get our first 50%. The second will come a year later. And so we have some very stringent guidelines of what we can spend that on. And so we will be bringing y'all some items that we feel like fall within the category of the Department of, not Department of Labor. Anyway, within the federal guidelines, but that will not be part of
Potentially
this.
some of these things?
I would say probably the only thing that I could think that might, if one of the things that would have been under the first CARES money was the software, the time and attendance software. That would have been under the first set of rules. I do not know about the second set of rules. I know the second set of rules, we have, infrastructure, there is the internet, fiber, that's a piece of it. And so there are big things that we can do with that money. As far as the small operational things, I don't have a good handle right now what all would actually fall within those guidelines. I know a lot of cities got into a lot of trouble spending money on things that didn't fall within the first set of guidelines. So before we come to you and say this is what we would suggest, we really want to make sure that we're utilizing those funds, because the last thing we want to do is have to pay the feds back $8 million. So those are not included.
But Mayor, if I may, even on the next tranche of monies that you're referring to, on that second set of CARES Act money, or, those monies, it's sort of for one-time, non-recurring items. It's not for ongoing operations, so.
The orange.
But like a bucket truck maybe?
Yeah, the
or-
orange.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Definitely a generator.
But, yeah.
Or generator, yeah, there you
Curious
go.
about
Yeah.
that, yeah. The generator.
The generator, yeah, that would
Almost
probably be
certainly, yeah.
one that
Some of those
would
capital equipments,
qualify.
absolutely.
And you might even get the roof and the floor out of that. What do you think? Floor resurfacing and mausoleum roof?
I don't know.
Anyway.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, like I
just
said,
want to
I
say,
don't know.
I really, really appreciate how well you have handled the CARES Act dollars. I mean, I know of several places that have gotten into trouble, and I'm just real impressed. I just want you to know.
Well, thank you.
As we keep going here.
Yeah,
But I love
that's the one
idea
thing,
of
we definitely don't want to
kicking
spend
off
money
some
the
of
way we're
these.
not supposed to, because I don't want to have to come up here and ask y'all to pay back money that, that would not be
we
good.
don't have.
That we don't have.
It's just so tricky.
Yes, it is. It
And
is.
I think you really need to be commended
Well, I
for
appreciate
doing a
it.
good job with that.
I appreciate it. So if you don't have any more questions immediately on general fund, let's jump over to utility fund real quick. They're very short.
Could
Uh-huh.
you reiterate, the next set of CARES dollars you said was how much?
I got an email about 2 weeks ago with a link to the updated spreadsheet, and it showed it was over 8. I don't remember if it was 8.1 or 8.8, but it's over 8. Because our original things, we thought it was 7, and it's over 8 now. Yeah.
And we'll
8.1.
get half of that.
Half now
this
and half
calendar
12 months
year.
later, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so going,
Read those regulations, by the way, that you sent me. I
was that
so
fun
impressed.
reading?
I've worked for the government.
On utility fund, here again is increasing the minimum wage. There are just a handful of people that work within the utility fund that are currently at that $12.70 hour, that mostly are the laborers. So bringing them to that next step of $13.33 would cost, this is all in, this is Social Security, Medicare, TMRS, the whole thing is about $8,000. So we are, again, categorizing that as a Tier 1. In water utilities, they have requested 3 new positions, a maintenance mechanic for wastewater and two operators, one in the water division and one in the wastewater division. At this point, there again, utilities' existing budget revenues and expenditures are balanced as of today. And so, in order to add additional operational expenses, then we have to find additional revenues. Well, in the utility fund, that's a rate thing. We want to spend some time looking at our rate structure. If you'll recall, we had a rate increase that was proposed now 5 years ago. It was a pretty good rate increase, and so we phased it in over a 5-year plan. Last year was the last year of that. And so we are not proposing a rate increase this year, but we would like to look at that in order to fund any future operational expenditures in the utility fund. I think one of the issues that we've come across is those rates were set based on an anticipated level of sales of water and sewer, and we've had a very wet few years. And so we have not sold the level of water that was anticipated in order for us to completely fund everything, because part of that rate structure was to set aside additional monies for future replacement of those big items, okay? And so we've been able to do that for a couple of years. We've set aside, I think, 1 year, $3 million, 1 year, $2.5 million. At this point, without those additional revenues coming in, we're not going to be able to propose that we do that this fiscal year. And so that's something that we want to take this next year to look at our rate structure again. And so therefore, we've pushed a couple of those positions to next year for review, instead of suggesting that possibly they are filled this year. And Mario and I have discussed with Steve Bartlett the need for maybe pushing a couple of those operators out. He was not happy, but he agreed.
He's kind of smiling right now,
Well,
but he has but it is pouting also.
Pout, that's
it's
a smile
mix.
and a pout. Yeah, that's typical.
He's trying to be cute while he's pouty.
It's a combination of pouting and smiling, but in all seriousness, because we have not sold water, because it's been a wet last few years, the revenues have just not come in like anticipated. However, we are fortunate that we are receiving $8.1 million that can be sort of seed money to start working on some of those capital improvements. So it's not just up against the rate structure, it's some of those monies could be used to help offset some of those costs of improving our infrastructure in our community.
I have a question. So you said that you guys aren't proposing a rate increase this year, and so this Tier 1 monies for the utility fund, is that included in the general fund 1.5
No.
cent increase? So where would that money
No,
come from?
this is utility fund, so it's completely separate from
Right.
it. So those are rates, and so what I will do is, we have not issued our draft budget. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to the departments, and we're gonna look at their operational budgets and say, where can you cut? Because we did this
To
with general
fund
fund,
the
to
60.
fund this in the
Okay.
current year. If you want this year, then we're gonna have to find money in the
Okay.
existing budget. And I
Thank
feel
you.
like for sure that we should be able to do that. We had very good luck with the general fund departments making some of those cuts in order to balance the general fund budget. And so I do not anticipate having a difficult time finding $50,000 to $60,000 in the utility fund.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on utility before we jump to sanitation? Okay, sanitation fund. Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, the code enforcement enhancement, a portion of that would be funded by the sanitation fund, because that employee will be working primarily on illegal dumping enforcement. They will be able to cross over as needed, but that is their primary job function, will be to work on illegal dumping enforcement. They will also need a vehicle, so that is a one-time cost of $25,000. This is with benefits, so the code enforcement officer is $56,730. Landfill has also requested some new positions. After speaking with Mr. Bartlett today, I know he's going to pout again. We have categorized these as the operator 2 at Tier 1. That is probably the most important person out there at the landfill. Those are the people that actually push the garbage on a literally hourly basis all day long. We have to have someone that has the licensing to run that heavy equipment. And so that is definitely the first need. We've categorized that as Tier 1. For future, they would like to add a laborer and a part-time laborer out there as well. Same thing in collections. They would like to look at adding a part-time laborer in the sanitation collections department. That is another thing that we've looked at, possibly looking at in future years. Here, increasing the minimum wage. Even fewer people at the sanitation make currently the $12.70, so the whole all-in cost for raising them to $13.33 will be about $4,000 annually. So that being said, the Tier 1 recurring cost is about $113,000. There is room within the existing revenues of the sanitation fund to fund that if you so choose. We will not have to do a rate increase to fund that. And so that is definitely something that is doable in this existing budget. There's no need to wait till next year to look at rates, because we can squeeze that in this year. And of course, the one-time reserves of the vehicle is $25,000, and there is sufficient reserves to fund that as well. Any questions about sanitation?
So is our reserve, I mean, I understand that the recurring cost operations bucket is different for utilities in general. Is there a different reserves bucket for utility than there is for the general?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the utility fund, what we have is actually part of that rate plan, the rate study that we did. We have operations that are covered by your rate structure, okay? Then we have reserves that is funded with annual depreciation. And I know years ago, it was always a big thing. We were able to fully fund depreciation. In the utility fund, depreciation on all of our existing equipment is about $4 million a year. We set aside out of operations $4 million, transfer it into basically an equipment replacement account. It's a depreciation fund to replace all the existing equipment and water lines, those types of things. What the water rate study was to do was all of our additional revenues, that if it was dry one year, all that money went into a third pot that is reserved for future growth, new equipment, new big water lines, sewer lines, that type of thing. And so the utility basically has two reserve funds. One for existing, replacement of existing stuff, and then one that we're set aside monies for future growth. Although this is not a replacement of an existing vehicle, it is a new vehicle, there is those funds there that we can, because one thing is, not that we're earning any interest this year, but in the past, that is $8 or $10 million earning lots of interest. And so there are funds there for new equipment. And as that comes along in utility and sanitation both, new equipment can be funded with that, with the overage that is in the equipment replacement fund.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I know this was a lot.
So to fund the operating budget with the way you've got it shown there, to include the inclusion person, we're probably looking at about a 2 cent, or a little 2 cent plus a little increase.
So not knowing exactly what we're gonna do on that, but let me just, as a point of reference, we created the development department several years ago. And we started that out with a set salary and training, monies for computers and softwares and that kind of thing. And I think we started that department budget at $150,000 all in. So I would anticipate this is going to be between 100, 150. Don't know. We got to sit down, and that's part of what that plan has to be, where that is. But yes, that is going to be in addition another Tier 1 ask. And so at that point, you're looking at all of these Tier 1s are $297,000, which would take probably 1.6 cents to fund that, plus whatever we set aside for the diversity inclusion. So depending on where that it would be in addition to that. Now, keep in mind that we did not raise taxes last year, and part of what the new calculation is when the state said you can no longer go to 8% for your max, now you're at 3.5%, but they also gave this increment rate. So last year, the difference between the adopted rate and the voter approval rate, we were able to bank that for future years, and you can carry that forward for 3 years. So we do have that ability to pull that increment rate forward.
And Mayor, the reason why, and again, I was brand new to the city, so it was sort of a surprise for the other 3 council, the original 5 that hired me. when we were going through the budget cycle, because there was a recommendation from staff at the time to do a budget increase, but it was not programmed for anything. Isn't that correct?
Right.
There wasn't new programs because we were in COVID, and so there were no new programs, there was nothing, and so I just couldn't get a good conscience knowing that we were going through COVID. Brand new city manager, just sort of working with Pam and scrubbing through it. I just said, do we really have to recommend a tax increase knowing that it's not going towards anything? It was just going to the bottom line. And we had cut back on so many recurring expenses and held the line on holding vacancies. So we knew we were going to add fund balance. So why add fund balance upon fund balance? And so the premise was, let's give me a year of time with the staff, understand what the budget is in totality, working with the council at the time and now the new council, and understand what the community's priorities are. And if we're going to come back to council with the tax increase, then it should be for things that you all want to do. That's why what you see, these priorities are streets, code enforcement, based on tonight's conversation, potentially the inclusion program, some customer service here in City Hall, because literally every week I find people wandering the halls, not knowing where they're going. Or phone calls are made to the city secretary's office because all calls for the city, when you dial, I don't even know the extension, 250006.
No. Oh, ho.
She doesn't even know the number, but the main phone number to City Hall comes to Jan. And so my thought is, could we have some admin help, at least one admin that can handle phone calls on each floor? So we have one on HR, which would be downstairs here, and HR be able to handle a lot of those calls that come into City Hall. The second customer service would be in the development services that can be shared between engineering and planning, because if we're trying to be friendlier to developers, we've got to have people who work with the developers working with developers and not answering phone calls on just administrative questions, when that could be really done with the highest and best use of someone's time, should be for those kinds of functions. So what you're seeing is really those priorities that you all have said have been priorities for you, as far as customer service, code enforcement, streets, trying to replenish some of the areas of streets that were taken away because, again, we were adding a lot more brush collection needs. And so if we're looking at raising taxes, and again, no city manager wants to ever recommend raising taxes, but because you didn't last year as a council, and now you've got some new programs because you wanted to get the details, which is this is why we presented the way we presented it, this allows you to start doing something and enhancing service delivery to the residents that are asking for these types of programs. And so that's kind of where that's why we've tiered these things the way we've done it, knowing that Tier 1, pretty small to be able to bring in, 300-some thousand, almost 300,000+ for some of these new programs. Tier 2, that's a big ask to push $730,000 to next year. So there's going to be obviously some haircuts on that. But it is about trying to, over a several-year period, trying to implement some of these new requests with staffing and programs that the staff needs, just because we haven't been able to do them for years.
So a rollback rate, if you did it year over year, it'd be less than 2 cents, wouldn't it? Be about $1, it'd be about 1.8, is that right? If you exceeded that?
At this point, I don't know,
Our
because I don't have any.
Our tax rate's 60-something
It's
cents?
61.6.
Yeah, so at 3%, you couldn't do 2% if you did year over year, but we can accumulate it over multiple years since we haven't had a tax increase.
Yes, and that's the good thing about this, that increment rate allows us to maybe one year like we did not raise taxes this year for whatever reason, and allows us the same ability to fund those things that we need to in the year that we need to, instead of just banking it like we would have done last year. It gives us the option this year to fund some of those programs that you want to do. And hopefully, like I said, Monday we will get our values, and I'll be able to calculate you. We ran some really rough numbers today, but until we have those values from the appraisal district, I don't even want to spout what those rates might look like.
So again, what we're asking is not that you approve any budgets. It's just based on what we presented and how we laid them out as far as tiers. Does it meet your priorities? And if it does, it allows us to start modeling, run the numbers so that come August, when we start going into tax rates, and getting more really into the finer details of those future revenue streams when it comes from the appraisal district, you still have your say, because at the end of the day, you can change whatever you want, all the way up until the time you adopt the budget, which is usually the first meeting in September.
Yeah, and when Kathleen, before our break, said, let's, wait, I gotta understand it all, I was with her. But
No, I
but
understand.
now you've done a great job. I understand where we're headed now, and so like I say, it makes a lot more sense. It was very, very helpful. Thank you.
And I don't do numbers, and I feel like I'm here, I'm with you, so that's.
Well, it's important for you to know that what you have right now, you have a balanced budget based on certain assumptions, because you don't have the final numbers from the appraisal district. But you have a balanced budget. But that means that you're not going to be putting on new programs, no inclusion, no additional staff for code enforcement, no additional staff for streets,
Right.
no additional staff for customer service. And that's okay, because we're still going to keep the doors open come October 1st. But if you want to do more things, this is where this comes to play.
My thought is on, just initially on the sanitation and utility fund, in part because of the way that it's gonna be funded. I feel like those track with what I consider to be, city priorities. And in general, across the board also, I support bringing employees up to the 13, 33, 37 per hour rate. Code enforcement too is something that we've been beating on and that we hear constantly about.
To me, that's a critical
Yeah.
element that needs to be enhanced.
And then the rest of, so then the rest would be under the customer service program enhancement, which also, my opinion is that it is in line, is that the way that you categorize this is in line with the priorities that we had set forth.
Yeah, personally, I don't see any of these asks that are wildly outside the realm of things that we have discussed wanting to be able to do. Either do in the first place or do more of, or do better. Certainly streets are another issue that we hear a lot about from constituents. So, anything within reason that we can do, as long as we can make it all fit reasonably well. And who knows, maybe our property appraisals will be way up and we'll have the money right there.
The street sweeper that was.
Probably not.
Tier 2. Okay, never mind. I got confused on something, but never mind. Both the operator 1 and the street sweeper were tier 2. Yeah,
Right,
got it.
yeah, that's a package.
Okay.
So I guess for me drafting y'all a first look at the budget, are there any of the tier 1 items that you are hesitant on? Are there any of the tier 2 that you would like to move into tier 1? Because what I can do is once I get those property tax values next week, we can model this with everything and see what we can do. Everything being the tier 1. I'm sorry, not everything. And then, like Mario said, this budget is an evolving thing. You will see it multiple times, and we will always be able to add and delete items. Just wondered if you want me to try to work in the tier 1 items on your first rough draft of the budget, or do you want to wait and give me more direction after the draft as it exists today of just existing, or do you want me to start trying to work on building this in? And then show you what that necessary property tax rate would be to fund these things once we get all those values.
I know this is probably not, but how does the minimum wage compare to that we pay compared to the wages that other people in the city pay for like laborers and?
I think I'm not real sure, and Brittany, you may know, I do know just from driving around like laborer type positions, I know Pilgrims is advertising up to $15. I don't know what they start at. I don't know. Do you happen to have any idea what the labor?
A little bit that I've seen, it does seem to be higher.
And I think that's a product of the last few months. People are really trying to attract workforce right now, and so it may be even more so than in the past. But
These are positions with benefits. I know Pilgrims.
right.
It is too.
Yeah. I will tell you that at this point, with us setting that property, minimum at $12.70, that was not a huge increase over what the original plan was to keep those lower level 8 and 9 pay grades, because we had very few people in those positions, mostly our part-time people, and then of course the laborer position. Like I said, I don't know what I know, and Steve, you might can say like construction stuff. If y'all are looking for operators and laborers, do you have any idea what construction folks are paying in Nacogdoches?
We did, we took kind of an informal survey, not directly through HR. And even at our current rate, we were below almost all the construction-related companies for minimum.
Thanks.
It would be helpful for me, what you said at the very end about having a clearer picture of what the tax rate increase, working these things in, what that would actually look like, so that then we can see, I mean, at least from my perspective, so at least I can say, oh, well, that sounds like a lot. We need to find somewhere else to cut and maybe then move tier 1 down to tier 2, or oh, that's not as bad, which I know is less likely.
Right. No, definitely. I think what and you kind of said that earlier. What we need tonight is are y'all in agreement that these tier 1 items need to be looked at this year, and we can work through with that assumption that we want to try to fund these tier 1 items if at all possible. Now, I may come back to you and say, I can't get you a property tax rate that funds all of this at this point, and that will be when we're gonna ask you to start picking and choosing of these things. But that gives me a good starting point, because, like I said, it's gonna change over time. The budget that we adopt in September is not the same one you will see August the 4th or 3rd or whatever. It does change. And so that is definitely, a normal thing. But this does give me some indication of if I'm on the right track by looking at some of these additions.
But we also have an additional position that isn't on here.
There will be another one, and I think that.
Inclusion.
So that's
Yeah, but I think I think we're at a good starting spot, and, I mean, would you even project in that position into what you give us, so we can see the effect?
I will, if y'all are interested in going that route and making that a tier 1 thing, yes, that would be something that I would build into it.
First year, the startup will be more expensive, obviously, because you've got to buy equipment, you've got to start the whole thing, and it will be less going forward.
Because we won't have them immediately in the first month.
It wouldn't start at the beginning of the fiscal year either, so.
But no, definitely, if that is the route the council wants to go, that would definitely be included. I just didn't have the numbers to include tonight for y'all, and so that's why it's not listed, but, that's something that we'll gain.
But I guess, to get it in the budget, to get it in the final budget, it's got to be approved.
Yeah, so the committee, that's gonna be a timing issue.
What we'll do, Mayor, is similar to what Pam mentioned when what was it called, the development office? So, we can create a placeholder of, and again, I'm just pulling a number, between 140, 150, just as a placeholder, not knowing exactly, I have an idea of the skill set that this person will need, but not knowing the exact salary and all the components and all the levels of expenses that this person would need to create their program, but we can at least create a placeholder, if that makes sense.
And that's exactly what we did with development. When we went through the budget process, we said, we're not real sure what this job description is gonna look like. We don't know what the pay grade's gonna be. So we put $150,000 in the budget, and then we worked through that, and then we were able to work within that budget of, tremendously. But I think the same holds true here. If we have $140,000, $150,000 placeholder, we can definitely work within that. and then you don't have to come back and do amendment later. We can build it in from the beginning.
Well, certainly for us to look at, initially,
Yeah,
I think that probably makes sense.
It's a placeholder
Yeah.
in the budget.
And it doesn't tie us into doing anything specifically. I mean, y'all change your mind at any point that is, it just won't be utilized this year or whatever, or we can change the amount or whatever we need to do. But it does create the ability to fund that, in this year if needed.
Okay.
So we're on the right
We don't,
track?
yeah, we just consensus again, I guess, and we just move down the road.
Excuse me, Mayor, Pam, did we get direction on the SAFER grant? Do we need to talk about that, or are we done with that?
I see
Yes,
you've
he
got
did.
it, I see you've got it
Okay.
included, and I'm assuming that
So
we're.
the SAFER grant, and let's go back to that, because we had to go through that so very, very fast at the end of
Oh,
the.
that's right,
of the-
it's not included
It's
right
not
now, is
included,
it?
so
Okay.
what that would be is, if we're funded in May, they would actually start in October-ish of '22, so it would be for the 22-23 year. It would hopefully, we're hoping to be 100% funded. We'll know that as we go through the grant process, for 3 years. And so, but what we're going to ask you is in the 22-23 year, let's start programming in some funding, some way, some revenue source in order to fund that in the year 4. And so for this year, we're not asking you to set up, because we don't even know at this point if we're going to be awarded that grant, and it'll be towards the end of the year. That will be something that if we're gonna ask for additional monies, it would start with next year's budget. We just needed to know if we wanted to apply, and I think y'all did say that y'all wanted us to apply for the grant.
I think
think
we
you did.
have, but we need.
We
need to
stopped.
s-
We
Oh,
stopped.
okay,
about
I'm
that.
sorry.
I just want to ask you, if later on, a couple years down the line, we don't have the dollars, what happens to us? Do the firemen all kill us?
You get a pout from the one back in the back.
Now he's pouting.
No, really,
There's probably some planting rules, so, we can't just let those folks go. So some decisions have to be made, and so it gets funded through other means, whether there are cuts in other departments. I mean, again, depends on the council at the time's threshold. That's why Pam is mentioning, if we're going to go down this path, we need to start modeling and planning for the future.
But I think but do we get penalized, I guess? That's kind of what, by the
Well,
grantor?
Well, it depends on the grant, and I'm not sure, and Keith may know this, I know on the police side, we had a grant, a COPS grant several years ago, that we were able to fund additional police officers. And you can't just let it go, it lapse, there's some planning rules that and I'm sure most feds are like that,
You
but I
have
don't
to
know.
repay it if you don't,
So-
that's really what
so-
I know I'm not gonna get killed. but-
This particular grant, the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, has varied and vacillated over the last 10 or 15 years. And they've changed the standards in the notice of funding opportunity. So as some cities in the Northeast started having to do layoffs, they really put a big emphasis on rehiring those laid-off firefighters in 2008, 2009, when the economy was in a bad way. The last 2 years, the commitment is that the federal government pays 100% of salary and benefits for 3 years, and that you have to go into it with the understanding that you're going to retain those positions at the end of that. That doesn't necessarily hold our feet to the fire. There have been other times where you had to make a commitment to hold those positions for 5 or 6 years, with the federal government funding some portion of it for the first 3. So it changes every year, and we really won't know that until March, when the federal rules come out. And so I can go on what the last 2 years have been and what the 3 years before that were, but again, this grant opportunity really changes. And what we really were looking to do here is just program the idea in on the heels of our fire station location and staffing study. This says we have an immediate need for 6 more firefighters on duty every day. 2 more firefighters on duty every day, so 6 total, to start working toward that, so that 8 or 10 years from now, we're not in the same position we're in today. We can start taking little baby bites out of it, and this is just a way to do that. So, and again, before we applied for the grant, we'd be back with the specifics for council to approve that application. And then again, it's still up to FEMA whether we're approved for those funds or not.
Is there any particular penalty if we stay understaffed where we are now? I mean, are we paying what would otherwise be unnecessary overtime? Are we paying more in any way?
No, our position now is firefighter safety. We have 2 people on 2 fire trucks today. And
Okay.
so this would get us to a place where we would
Yeah.
never have less than 3 people on a fire engine when it rolls out of the station.
Right.
And when they get to a scene, they can actually start working.
And that's
That's the big
pretty,
game.
pretty hard and
Absolutely.
fast recommendation. on that,
Absolutely.
yes, okay.
And the other thing is that this would long-term ensure our very positive insurance services office rating.
That was my other question, is
so-
whether we
so-
would pay an insurance penalty if we did not
So
have
in the
that
next
extra.
36 months, no. But in 10 years, if we're not making progress toward that in 10 years as we continue to see growth. And so we're just looking for those opportunities to have
So-
some help.
So if we remain staffed where we are now, we could end up paying a penalty down the
So
road at any
the
rate.
city wouldn't directly pay the penalty, but the taxpayers would
Yeah.
in the form of higher insurance rates.
Right,
And
right.
so it's, do you pay a few dollars in taxes, or do you pay a lot of dollars in insurance? And it's
Yeah.
just a matter of making that balance, and that's the hard job that you
Plus
guys
the
have.
compromise of safety for our firefighters. as
Absolutely.
well, so, yeah.
Okay, I think we're in consensus on the blues and the oranges and the tier 1s and safer.
And the
And
safer,
I especially
yeah.
appreciate that Chief Kiplinger is gonna go get a grant for that new ladder truck.
We might give him 6 firefighters if you get a grant for the truck.
Do you want a motion to adjourn?
Thank
Oh,
y'all.
yeah.
Thank y'all.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I so moved.
Are we ready?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Jane.